Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. With my apologies, we tried to air our interview with John William Warner IV earlier today, but it was completely my fault. What happened? What happened was I was DMing him on Twitter with the link to join the show, and he had emailed me earlier, going, "Where's the link to the show? Are we still on?" And as these things happen, I didn't check my email, and he didn't check his Twitter. But I'm happy to say that Mr. Warner is here with us and everything is okay. Let's bring him right in here. Mr. John Warner, good to see you.
What's up? It makes us look both like idiots. We're like,
yeah. Where is he? No, bad shows. I know that. You know what, though? It's good because I gave everybody a really nice introduction to you, some of your history, your father's history, which is incredible. And I told everybody about your book. We read the whole description from Amazon while I was trying to fill time, so you got a good plug in already. And hey, you're a big guest, so I can milk this. We've got two parts. We have a big build up, and then here we are. So.
Sorry, folks. Wasting time, but
I've been joking with Mr. Warner that he's a member of the Illuminati, and I thought that he was busy with Illuminati business. I thought maybe he's busy with Illuminati stuff and he couldn't do the interview, right?
Well, the sacrifice at the church, and I had to go to people, and
Oh no! Yeah,
Illuminati is a catch-all term. It really only means the illumined ones. You could be dark or positive. It doesn't matter, but you're illumined. So really, everyone in the Disclosure Movement, all your fans, we're all Illuminati.
I guess we are. But generally, don't people mean that like rich 1% ruling class that hold all the secrets?
Well, they're not illumined. I got news. They're not illumined. I mean, some idiot just thought, Illuminati, that's good, and it's stuck. And it's like, go back to the Bavarian Illuminati in 1780s. It just meant a group of people who were illumined with, of course, the gift of the lamp or occult mystery school information, Freemasonic stuff as well. And so that's all it really meant. I can tell you. A lot of these rich, Committee of 300 people, oh no, they're not.
You got me started down this Committee of 300 rabbit hole too, by the way. Can you explain what that is for those that don't know? Because your family is certainly included in that.
Yes, it is. And I found out about it maybe 20 years ago. I'd read something about it. I'm not sure who came up with all the, the pyramid and the Committee of 300. But it does make some sense. Sometimes the lists of families change, but really it's these top families in America as far as financial wealth and influence. And that is true. My great-grandfather was, billionaire robber baron. My grandfather was a billionaire robber baron and a spook.
Yes, for those that don't know, Mr. Warner is not just related to former Senator Warren, John William Warner III.
Not related to Mark Warner.
I answered that. Somebody asked that. There's a new Senator Warren from Virginia that's no relation to you. But then the other side of your family comes from the Mellon family from Carnegie Mellon.
That's the Committee of 300 side. The Warners are not. My dad and my grandfather was a World War I Army doctor. They were strictly middle-class people.
Middle-class working people, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Your dad married up, right? Your dad married up.
During the Depression, my grandfather, my father and uncle were little kids. He was a gynecologist and a surgeon. Sometimes people would pay him in shoes or chickens or it's true. And I remember my brother would tell me about
that's funny. My brother was a mechanic and he had a shop in a bad neighborhood. And back before they went to cards for food stamps, people would try to pay him in food stamps all the time. And he had a family, so he was like, okay. But it's going to be, yeah.
Well, it's the Mellons that are, my cousin Chris Mellon of the UAP task force or whatever.
And you've been very critical of Mr. Mellon, and I tend to agree with most of what because you lay out some reason. You're not just trashing him; you're questioning his motives, his connections to the CIA or other government entities?
I know Chris. I've met his family. They're wonderful people. Chris is a nice guy. It's just, we're on opposite ends of the table. It's nothing personal. It's just business. And, I don't hate him. I don't dislike him at all. I'm just disappointed in his version of UFO disclosure, and him and Louis Elizondo and Hal Puthoff and all those TTSA people, and everyone now, Marco Rubio and Senator Gillibrand and all the other people sort of glommed on. My new favorite is Ross Coulthart, who is a well-known journalist from 60 Minutes and other things, and now he's on board as sort of this lightweight, doesn't really know anything about UFOs. Just they're all sort of, the UFO subject, especially if you grew up in DC, with my dad, it was the third rail. You didn't talk about it, and then in 2017, all of a sudden it's okay to talk about it. And it's like, okay, I gave him a fair shot. I waited 3-4 years before, I had enough of the lies, and they are lying. That, sometimes they lie by omission. They have plausible deniability. The Tic Tacs are Lockheed Martin, is what I've been told. So when they do disclose, the Tic Tacs aren't ET, they're Lockheed Martin. And so they have all these fallbacks. That's typical, intel community stuff.
Did you know, John, that Lou Elizondo has almost always lived within 30 minutes of a major Lockheed facility? Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
I call him Lockheed Lou for a reason. I think that he's on the payroll. Tell those people it's aliens, Lou.
Well, they're
Don't
on
let them see our black
payroll.
Projects, right?
I don't think Chris Mellon's on a payroll. He doesn't need it. He's a fellow millionaire, but he's come out of retirement to do this, probably out of some distorted version of patriotism, where he thinks, in a patrician way, that we need, the American people can't handle it, and they've got to handle it, not us. And they'll dole out the truth with a dropper, and sometimes not at all. And they think that's truly best. And I will give them one point. If you just dump all this stuff out, and the stuff I've been talking about, human trafficking and bank fraud, and all this stuff that's possible, that could be funding streams for all this, UFO back engineering, USAP, and unacknowledged projects. That's, it's not just me. There's other people who have come up with that. But there will be some panic. And actually, a guy, I was listening to a podcast, and a guy who says he's a contactee to an alien group, I think it was the Arcturians, and he said, look, they said that disclosure can't happen too fast because a lot of people around the world will lose faith in religions and commit suicide.
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
I think they have a point.
Really? Do you think that if we found out tomorrow that there was other intelligent species in the universe, do you think people would really kill themselves? Because we've got the Vatican preparing people. The Vatican is preparing people for that possibility.
It's true. It's not the revelation that we're not alone in the universe. I think most people around the world are coming to grips with that. It's the dirty deals and the potential dirty laundry we've done for all that UFO technology. If that's leaked out all at once, it's a pretty hefty load of, Epstein quality and worse stuff. And I'm not happy talking about it. I'm not comfortable, but I will, because it's distinct possibilities. I mean, this is a dirty world. I've been around it for 60 years. I'm 60 years old. I've traveled all over the world with my dad. And I'll tell you, I've been to war zones. And I mean, in my view, the whole world is under soft fascism. Every country. Some are more.
It sure looks at. Have you seen Australia lately? Oh my God, what's going on over there? It's crazy.
They're moving towards camps a medium fascism that's overt, and that's very disturbing. And
it's right out in the open now. Yeah,
it's very disturbing. And so, I think when people talk about disclosure, not that we should hold back, but disclosing all that dirty laundry, whatever the truth is, because I don't claim to know the truth. I have educated speculation and opinions, but it could really. I mean, there are some very no offense to anyone, but very simple, very religious, people that have put all their eggs in one basket. And when you destroy that hard floor reality for people, yeah, I could see some of that happening, sadly.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. On second thought, I think I could see some people, because it would destroy their paradigm and all their beliefs would go out the window. And
yeah, I mean, all of us in the disclosure movement, from mild to wild, we can hack it because we've had years, or in my case, decades, or in other people's, their whole lives preparing for it. But son of a bitch, man, if a lot of that stuff is true, it is beyond disgusting. I mean, we've sold out the human race. I think we have. I think certain groups have.
I was just going to say that certain 1% ruling class is certainly.
I'll send you this report I wrote for some people who wanted my opinion on what do you think the deep state is going to disclose in like 15 years. And I spent a few days on it to make sure I did it to the best of my ability. And, there is one remote possibility. It's the remotest one, but it is something that crossed my mind. Chris Mellon and Lou and Rubio and Gillibrand and this whole, Pentagon UAP task force, UAP office bullshit, disclosure initiative. One thing they are doing, and I'm here today to prove, I mean, they've stimulated certain factions of the disclosure movement to up their game, because it's such a blatantly, goofy, dumb, lying, misdirecting, distracting initiative. And so I thought, shit, are they trying to get us to do their jobs for them? Because there may be elements in the deep state around the world that are much worse, much more fascist, and say, if you guys over there, in the Pentagon, CIA, if you do disclose too much, we'll split the earth in half. We don't give a fuck.
Yeah, it could be.
And they're like, shit, okay, how do we disclose without disclosing? And it's a remote possibility, but they definitely have stimulated a lot of us, Greer and Daniel List and you and me and everyone who stand, I think, in equal stead with everyone in the disclosure movement stands as equals. They've really lit a fire under our asses.
Yeah, you're right about that. It does seem
they
like
really have.
They have helped to make the discussion more mainstream. They've helped to make more coverage on mainstream media. But but that kind of bothers me too, because then we get these personalities that are kind of fake, or embellished backgrounds that are suddenly UFO experts all over mainstream media, and you go,
it's rife with bullshit. And
yeah, it sure is.
So it's probably maybe not that, but that is a remote possibility. The real possibility, I think, that's coming down the road in a few years is they disclose maybe 30% of everything. And then they say, sure, we've got bases on the moon and Mars, and we're mining asteroids, and we're doing trade with a lot of ETs and stuff like that. And blah, blah, blah. And what are you going to do about it? Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Because if it's like the Nazis, after a while, they were like, fuck yeah, we're fascists. What are you going to do about it? And everyone's like, well, I thought we were going to vote. Everyone thought they were going to vote Hitler out in the next election. And they're like, no.
Yeah, there's no more elections.
Herr Goebbels is going to get on the radio and tell you what to think.
I want to get into that because you and I share a particular fascination with World War II history. And especially when it comes to some of the secret parts of the Nazi government, their programs, their weapons development, the esoteric parts of the Nazi movement where they were looking for strange esoteric objects and they were looking for power. They got the Spear of Destiny. They were looking for the Holy Grail. Yeah. And all of these other things. It's fascinating to me.
I believe that was secondary stuff. The Ark of the Covenant. They really were looking for all that. The Ahnenerbe SS, which is the ancestral, archaeological wing of the SS,
Which is fascinating, right? Hitler sent all these guys out all over the world to go digging for stuff.
Hitler didn't. Himmler did.
Himmler, yes.
Hitler was into some of the occult and Tula Society. Everyone thinks he wasn't. Oh, yes, he was. That's why he was a vegetarian, because he and Himmler and the other Nazi SS hierarchy had all read the book by Bulwer Lytton, The Coming Race, which was written in the late 19th century, and it described a man's journey to this inner earth, meeting with Aldebaran ETs that worship the black sun, and they were the Vrilya. And so Vril energy is chi, prana. We all have it. And so, I think the Vril and Tula Society go back farther than, the early 20th century. I think they go back Lords of the Black Stone. They were all kind of in Knights Templar, but also the Teutonic Knights. Mm-hmm. That was their model. And in the 19th century in Prussia, the Germany wasn't a unified. The Prussian military, the best in the world, probably, arguably. The Prussian aristocrats had tons of money and castles and land. And there were nationalists who wanted a unified Germany. And then there were the philosopher scientists who were into alchemy and using the philosopher's stone, which is a person's higher consciousness, in the alchemical mix, whatever you want to do, because that's a necessary ingredient. They understood that very clearly. Now, I think there were some people in America and England and France, who also did. But the Germans and Prussians had a knack for, apparently, and this gets into the Sonora Aero Club, which was alchemy, creating a red mercury serum to power the airships of the 19th century. And by all accounts, they had reinvented anti-gravity propulsion in a very limited way. Probably, it's hard to say. Who knows who was flying around in India in a Vimana 10,000 years ago, but certainly within the last few thousand years, they resurrected this technology, among others. Now, that sounds wild, but it does make sense when you connect all the dots with the 1897 airship mystery, and then the
brilliant. Yeah, there was a huge wave. There was a huge wave of these airships.
Right, and then they after World War I, there's a wild theory out there. I kind of wrote it in my book. This Ananabri, real life Ananabri guy, his name's Ernst Schaefer, and he's describing to my team of characters. He's like, look, Hitler is really the illegitimate son of Kaiser Wilhelm.
I've heard that. That is crazy theory.
He does not know it. Well, it's not as crazy to think. Remember, all these kings and queens, they had illegitimate children out the yin-yang as far back as we can remember. So
I guess they didn't have good condoms back then. I don't know.
The thing, and sometimes, usually they ignored them, but sometimes they would pay for their education and upbringing to make sure they didn't go by the wayside. It's a remote possibility, I'm going to capitalize those words, that Hitler was his illegitimate son, because I think the Tula Society followed Hitler before and after the war, and he was a house painter and a failed artist and these other things, but once he, I think they knew he had a spark of brilliance. Now, he was nuts and a psychopath, but he was not stupid. And he wasn't a coward. He won the Iron Cross.
And then I think it's interesting what you said about him becoming a vegetarian, because somehow it's okay to kill millions of people, but he was against animal cruelty.
Because the Vrilya,
the
word is that
crazy.
He and Himmler met with the Vrilya sometime in the 20s and 30s. But, this is getting into wild ET speculation, but there is some premise for it. And so a lot of people think they know a lot about Hitler, but they don't. You have to read 100 books. And even then, you got to read between the lines. He was very complex. And so I think that when the Tula Society picked him, when he got up in the beer keller in Vienna or Munich, and did his speech, boy, Haushofer was there, and a few Prussian generals, and I think Goering was there, and Hess. Boy, they saw the spark of brilliance. The guy,
they recognized his oratory ability. Yeah, they recognized his golden tongue. Yeah,
right. He understood the occult to some degree. He could walk the talk big time. And so everyone's like, oh, it's just a happenstance fate. There's none of that. In metaphysics, everything is predetermined by some degree. We're just sort of on a tram line living our lives. And I've kind of, I've embraced synchronicity because it's happened to my wife a lot. And that gets into Carl Jung and other metaphysical things. But back to dear old Adolf, he does this beer keller putsch in 1923.
And that's a failed attempt at taking over the country, right? Yeah.
Which wasn't as big of a deal as people think it was. But anyway, he goes to Landsberg prison, and all these people write to him. And this is when the Nazi Party was very young and inexperienced, and they had, the Freikorps and the early SS and all these guys, bully boys, beating people up in the streets.
Brown shirts, yeah.
All that stuff going on. But aristocrats wrote to him in Landsberg prison. And of course, Hess helped him write Mein Kampf, which is barely readable. But Hess was very smart too. He had grown up and he was way into the occult. And I write about that in my new book, Lion, Tiger, Bear. Hess had grown up in Alexandria, Egypt, a lot of his young life. And he spent a lot of time with mystics. And I wrote it that way. And so he was probably mystic number one in the Nazi Party. And, there were some shadow people behind that. I forget the general, Subettendorf and Haushofer. They were all mystics too. But Hess, boy, he knew his shit.
He was deeply steeped in the occult.
Right. And I think whatever Hitler didn't know, he figured out in Landsberg prison, because what else are you going to do? Drink beer. And they were able to drink beer and eat sausage. All they wanted.
Yeah, I read that somewhere, and I thought that was funny that he had really good food, because he did become something of a martyr or a figurehead for this German movement where they wanted some kind of revolution.
Not really then, right? But a little. The thing is, it's all these aristocrats, and if you think about the Nazi Party, it's just a bunch of thugs. Not so much. They did have some brains. They had a lot of brains, actually. And here's the reason I figured it out. And I think J.P. Farrell writes good stuff, and there's some Peter Levenda does a good job too.
I love Peter Levenda.
Yeah,
I started with him with the Necronomicon, and I thought, this is crazy. It's an interesting connection that he sort of came up with that or was behind that, and I didn't find that out till years later.
Right. So the Mercedes Motor Company sends their top representative to pick him up with two brand new supercharged S-Class touring cars. There's a picture of Hitler there. He's very stern, at the prison. That's strange. He wrote to this guy in prison, said, I require two Mercedes with, superchargers. This gear.
They just gave him these really expensive supercars.
Right. Hitler was a gearhead. That's why he loved everything mechanical. People don't know that. He ride around in those cars, the big Mercedes, with a salute. He knew all about how they ran because Ferdinand Porsche designed them. And he was an admirer of Ferdinand Porsche. And this is my first book, Little Anton. And so when he gets out of prison and they go traveling around, they go to these fancy homes, as well as doing speeches. And aristocratic ladies would take their diamond necklaces off and put them around Hitler's neck and his entourage. They transferred wealth. Sort of on the down low.
So they were funding some of his efforts.
Right. So some of these aristocrats were kind of like, the 5% of these, elite families who, know a thing or two about the occult and metaphysics and human history and, the mystery school. We're not alone in the universe and we're not the top predators on planet Earth. They knew all this stuff and they supported Hitler because they had a good idea, I think, that he was able to pull this off and get, ET advisors and other people who are of a regressive nature, vibration. And we'll create this wonderful, conquer the world and make it fascist. No more, goody two shoes people around. No more American, pseudo democracy.
Well, it's funny because fascism kind of works for people who agree with the fascist in charge. Right?
It's more complicated. It has to do a lot with corporations. If you look up what fascism really means, it's totalitarianism, but it also is a very structured corporate entity that's a component of it. It's very
sounds like the United States right about now. Yeah.
You know,
they own everyone. They own everything.
Just run the world, man.
Yeah.
You know, and
they do.
You know, all these Committee of 300 families. I mean, my family, the Mellons, Mellon Bank, Standard Oil. You know, U.S. Steel in Pennsylvania. You know, U.S. Coal.
I'm in Pennsylvania. I know U.S. Steel very well.
All these
I know I have family that worked there back in the day.
You know, I invest in Exxon and shit. You know, a lot of people do. So
I love that I saw you on some podcast and you were telling people to go down to Mellon Bank and open an account or something. I thought that was so funny.
I got it.
You're a big cheerleader for Mellon Bank.
You have to say everything literally. People are like, I knew he was an asshole. He said it. You know, I do not get any kickbacks or anything. Trust me. But, you know, it does work to a degree. But, you know, America is kind of a corrupt constitutional republic. And even my dad agreed with me. You know, he said all senators and congressmen, and, you know, they're all bought and paid for by special interests, you know. And he had the Navy and Marines behind him, so he didn't have to deal with a lot of that bullshit. But the Navy and Marines, you know, military-industrial complex, they used to call him. Some journalist called him.
Somebody's making all the weapons for them. Yeah, somebody's making all those weapons for those guys. Somebody's got to build the ships and make the guns and the missiles.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm behind a strong military, but holy shit, if the secret space program is as big as it is, as it's reported to be, you know, one person, I think Catherine Austin Fitts predicted that the real GDP of America is probably like 25 trillion a year. And so what do we get? 1.5 trillion for the public budget.
And the rest is all on the road. Yeah.
So, you know, our roads, schools, and bridges are falling apart, but we have a military that can whip every single nation together combined 10 times over. You know, a general said that in a press briefing. You know, it's ridiculous. It's like, why? It's because
and you know what's funny is it's
in space fighting.
Some presidents try to like bear down and you know pare the military down, but then you get somebody like Trump that comes in and he builds everything right back up, even to more level than it was before it was deflated. You know, so now we're at super high levels of
all these presidents
and new ships, and
they're only middle managers. They're transient custodians of the status quo. And everyone's like, oh, Trump is on board with getting rid of the satanic people and Epstein and QAnon and all this religious stuff. You know, God wins.
Oh, we don't. Just so you know, we don't say that here. We don't say that letter of the alphabet here. YouTube does not like it.
Politics is just it's distilled judgment, and I don't trust any presidents or politicians. No, you know, I think Trump was probably maybe a little bit more altruistic than, you know, the Biden administration, but that doesn't mean they're not part of the deep state either. Were they doing all these good deeds? You know, I don't know. I certainly don't trust, you know, people coming out and saying, well, you know, the secrets, you know, Trump's secret space force and you know, black ops troops are liberating deep underground military bases.
Yeah, there's a lot of nutty stuff going around. I don't know if you heard this, but from Simon Parks.
I don't know.
Simon Parks says tomorrow Biden's stepping down, and this is like one of the latest of the nonsense from him.
Shit, you know, you know, like I say, I don't have a lot of concrete answers for people, but I consider everyone's information because it's just information. I consider that any good researcher, historian, or writer is going to do that, and so, you know, there's things that I don't cotton to. I mean, I know we live in a universe where everything is possible.
Sure. Actually, I wanted to get your
likely, yeah.
I wanted to get your comment on this because I'm not sure that it's accurate, but you know, sometimes because you're into the wild side of conspiracy land, and I will say in John's defense is he listens to everybody. You're very I was surprised. I saw you on a podcast with somebody that in 1 hour, I can't remember her name. It's going to escape me. I'll try to get it. She was talking about past lives and Regina Meredith, yeah. And I went, John is so nice. He's just sitting there listening to this. But this is the latest from Simon Parks. He says, The information I can share with you, but I can't say it's 100% going to happen. I can only tell what we've been told is that President Biden will be forced to stand down around the 15th of December. Kamala Harris basically took over from Biden. The plan was to get this view. It's like this whole fantasy world that these people live in, right? So can you comment on some of that stuff? Because you're getting a bad rap. I just want you to know, whether you know it or not, that you get a bad rap because some people, just because you'll listen to somebody, John, they say that you support what they're selling.
Yeah,
and I don't think that's accurate, right?
No, that's very shallow thinking. It's just they taint everyone. It's like Twitter. They just I was criticizing Elon Musk and Tesla. Tesla is a military contractor corporation. They're like, no, it's not. Tell me one thing that and it's like, my God, do you do any homework at all?
Yeah, I saw what you did on their electric vehicles. That was awesome.
Yeah,
I'm going to share that.
Of course they are. He doesn't become a trillionaire.
Yeah.
The military-industrial complex is the biggest spender in America. You don't become that rich. You don't become an approved billionaire unless you inherit it. Without the military-industrial complex or the Intel corporate complex pulling your strings. I'm sorry. That's just
I love this.
That's my 20s.
Tesla is nothing more than a thinly disguised military contractor. Elon Musk is a deep state, lack bar none. This is Tesla's Cybertruck gets turned into military vehicle.
I got attacked viciously, and I don't care, but it's just so obvious, and people have this cognitive dissonance, and it's like, I'm like, you're defending a trillionaire that doesn't give a shit about any of you. It's madness. And so I know the whole Twitter scape is full of trolls and CIA paid informants.
I think you have a lot of fun with them, though. You have fun with them.
I mean, I
don't enjoy that bar back and forth.
These are my opinions. I've had an interesting life. I've got a lot of background that supports that. I know a lot of military people. They're like, hell yeah, Tesla's. They tell me stuff. It's not secret. It just takes some digging. And digging. It's not all there in the front page of the New York Times for every idiot to read. Tesla is duplicitous. It's not like Lockheed, who says, oh, of course we make UFOs. They basically said that. Ben Rich said.
Yeah, ours and theirs. There's ours and theirs.
Tesla's like, oh, we're this technology company. We're going to save the world with, electric cars, which were out 120 years ago. Ferdinand Porsche invented the hybrid electric car in 1903. This is ridiculous. This is old technology. And everyone's like, oh no, he's a visionary, man. And I'm like, visionary? What? I mean, Tesla's a decent car, but it's a technology company, not a car company. What else are they doing? What's all that big place out in Bluffdale, Utah? And I've heard some strange stories about that place. I mean, come on, this is obvious stuff. And so, I don't care. But back to your point, Sion Parks is very interesting. I've followed him and I've listened to what he has to say. Some of the things are interesting. But when they get into the prophecies and predictions and what's happening behind the scenes, it's like, well, how the hell are we supposed to know what's happening behind the scenes? Because you're telling us? I mean,
or how, what I always thought was it was crazy. Like, he acts like he's got a personal line to Trump and all this stuff. And I'm like, why would Trump just pick a driving instructor from England to tell all the secrets to? It's stupid.
He's more than that. I mean, he's very intelligent. You can't.
I'll give him that. He's an intelligent guy, but he's also running medbed scams right now.
Well, his mother was MI5. And
no, his mother used to be an alien, but then when he got into the letter of the alphabet, all of a sudden his mother worked for MI5, and I don't know that that's accurate. I've never checked.
I don't know if I haven't checked on that, but I some people told me that is legit. But the problem is maybe Biden is going to step down, but the problem is no one is going to tell the public. Trump could be doing all these miraculous things with a military team in the sub basin of the Pentagon, QAnon Central, and it's like, but we're not told about any of it. They pumped out all this religious stuff. Juan O. Savin is JFK Jr. I mean,
that's crazy.
My sister knew JFK Jr. is a nice guy. I hope he's alive, but this is very strange stuff to be putting all your eggs in baskets that are just bizarre even by our standards. Steve and John. We're in the sub basement.
Yeah, we're in the ghetto of conspiracy land trying to figure it out, I guess.
Yeah,
but I have a problem with when they get to be sort of cult figures. We covered Simon Parks and problems that he has with women and all this other weird cult-like behavior, and now he's promising people med beds and collecting money for stuff that doesn't exist. And I don't follow any of that stuff anymore because I just think it's all nonsense. It's like opium for people that were pissed off that Biden won. That's all it is. It's all designed for people that were pissed off that Biden won. Well,
let's not talk about politics because that's just nonsense.
But, yeah, we'll agree on that. Even though your dad was a good politician, wasn't he? A fascinating guy.
People throw their votes away. They don't mean anything. In my opinion, from what I know, important Senate races, they're fixed from the beginning. So my dad, he was a Navy Secretary of the Navy. He was on board with the conservative Republican, military party. I mean, he was a shoo-in, in my view. And so, certain Senate races aren't that important, but the important ones that have to do with military stuff, those are done behind the scenes, just like all presidential elections.
Yeah, they sort of anoint someone, right? They just anoint someone that they know is going to do what they want, right?
And they're all sort of on the same team. That's why everyone's like, oh, Mr. Trump and those guys are going to disclose and be our heroes. And it's like, I don't think so, because they may be a little better, more positive, but they're still deep state. They still are not showing the American people anything. Everyone says we're going to have these military trials and everything. I've heard nothing about it. I know they're happening. Some of them are happening, but I'll tell you this much. Let me backtrack, because when people talk about this medbec technology, let me just share what I know for whatever it's worth.
Okay. Listen, I have an open mind, but we, just so you know, we have covered at least three different characters in conspiracy land that are running scams right now. And I can call them that confidently because we have done our due diligence. One girl is a psychic healer who is selling people medbed sessions where she says she's going to take you up through a Stargate to a spaceship and all this other stuff. But then in the fine print at the end of the ad, she says, this is a Skype call. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and that's $250. And I've talked to people who bought that because they're terminally ill or they have some strange illness that doctors couldn't help them with. So I'm open to the idea of medical technology that I don't know about or whatever, but I'm very cautious because I've seen the detrimental side of the scammers taking advantage of people's belief in this. But tell us what you know about the reality of these things, or what you believe the reality is.
The disclosure movement is rife with, things that are, little pyramids and all these things that may or may not have an effect given your vibration, which is,
orgone pyramids and
they might work, for certain people, but I don't know. But not that I know anything for sure, but I did talk to Chris Mellon in our conversation about the medbec technology, which I have heard from some military people that I trust is real, but it is highly classified and it's for black ops teams only.
Oh, that's interesting.
We're going to get the public version will be, version 1, whereas in the black programs it's version 1000. And it works off light, color, sound, and frequency, because the theory is in a holographic universe, we're made of atoms, which have photons, which are units of light. And you can manipulate that in order to let the body heal itself. And so I think that's a real technology. And we discussed it, and he did agree that should be made public. The problem is it's going to cure cancer overnight and cure everything. And, cancer is what, $700 billion a year, trillion.
Yeah, I've heard that conspiracy a lot. They don't want a cure. They want treatment.
No, if you look at cancer, over the years, my father followed cancer because his father died in his arms with cancer when he was about 47.
Well, your dad did pretty good. He lived to 94, right?
He had cancer, but
yeah. And my condolences. I know he passed away in May of last year.
Yeah,
I think,
he was a great guy. I mean, he loved his country and everything. He knew his portion of the UFO file, and
he was an interest. Yeah, we're going to get into that because I love the stories about you asking him and him sort of like, forget about that. Forget about that, right? Didn't he do that to you?
Sometimes.
When you asked him directly about the UFO
in the
stuff,
beginning,
UFO files?
In the beginning, yes. But anyway, that's my medbed tidbit. I hope it's a real.
Well, you know what? There's
always let it out.
There's always
they're
some
going to let it out slowly.
Yeah, there's always some nugget of truth in some of these conspiracies. So I have thought maybe something like that exists.
I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think that's real technology. We use back engineered technology every day. Our laptops, ballistic glass, our smartphones are very powerful.
You think that's back engineered ET technology? A laptop and a smartphone?
That's the word. We use this stuff. We've been using it for 70 years.
Well, that's the
the Germans figured that out. Guess who? I think. Yeah, the Germans are very clever, but come on. Free energy, transistors, chemical lasers, all kinds of things. Not that we aren't clever. We're very clever engineers. A lot of people say, out there where we have a very good reputation, we take junk from a junkyard or that's given to us in trade, and we make like hot rods. We make stuff really work. And so, my thing is what makes sense in a logical, even though everything's sort of illogical and anarchy, but what really makes sense. And so even I subscribe to some wild theories because in the greater big picture, it makes sense. So medbec technology, all these back engineered technologies, the microchips and everything, our cars, Teslas, that's all back engineered, come from back engineered programs. They splice off and one technology leads to a dozen others, but the roots come back to not all, but a lot of it is back engineered ET stuff because there were thousands and thousands of crashes of ET craft starting.
You think there were thousands of them? Oh. Really? I believe that there may have been, but they're pretty rare. I don't know that. No. Thousands. You really believe that?
Well,
thousands of them.
What makes sense? What makes sense about that? Now, ET's coming into our atmosphere from a higher dimension, going superluminal. Don't you think they would be smart enough to throw the switch? That once they entered our 3D reality, which is very dense, like chocolate pudding, and they smack into that, but they forgot to throw the switch.
Yeah, I've heard this argument about how could they come all this way and then have problems? But the truth is that any machine can fail. Well, any machine engineered by anybody can fail.
Pilot error. I mean,
pilot error, yeah.
The smartest people in the world can barely tie their shoes. So, that's number one. But number two, some of them are on purpose. Number three, some of them are shot down. And the word is the Klystron brothers. The Valerian. I got this wrong. Sigrud. Anyway, the Klystron tube radar was scalar, and apparently that can be used to disable the navigation systems in a craft, and they spin in.
I had heard that before.
Yeah, this is what directed energy weapons are. They're scalar, which is scalar waves. And so that makes sense to me. The other thing is, I think we do have a trade that's been going on for 70 years. Hey, what do you want? Sometimes it's chocolate, heroin, and spices. What else? What else can you get at a black market in Iraq in some small town? The answer is anything you fucking want: illegal weapons, human trafficking, spices, flowers, chocolate, anything, coffee for sure. But genetics are supposedly, and more people than just Corey Good and everyone says that. There's a lot of people who say that's the big barter chip out there is genetics, because a lot of races of ETs out there are on a very dry, hot planet, and they're not doing so well. They're living underground. And if they can get some of our 12-strand DNA, it'll help them survive. Now, that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose it would make sense if you could get some genetic material from a better from a species that could
Yeah,
help
they're
you
not just
survive
baking
more.
us in a microwave and having us for dinner, although that probably happens.
And thanks,
We eat
Fulcanelli,
animals.
for
Other
your
people eat
kindness and
animals.
generosity.
Yeah, I
We
mean, flesh
appreciate it.
eaters.
I want to get back for a second to the Nazi technology, because I know you know a lot about this stuff. And I've always been on the fence, and here's why. I used to totally believe in all the Nazi UFOs and all the programs, but then I found out from talks with Walter Bosley and having him as a guest a few times that a lot of these stories of Nazi flying saucers came from European tabloids that were sort of pro-Nazi, and they wanted to have sort of a resurgence of Nazi ideals, or like a Fourth Reich. And so these stories about Nazi flying saucers got floated by a lot of tabloid newspapers. And for some of the stuff like Honeyboo, there's little to no evidence, but for other stuff there's a great deal of evidence. Can you talk for a little while about the Nazi scientists, the Bell, the Nazi flying saucers, their exotic weapons, and Project Paperclip, and what happened to all those brilliant scientists?
Yeah, I like.
Thank you, Patrick.
I like Bosley's books, the Empire of the Wheel series, and I put a lot of that in my new book, Lion, Tiger, Bear. Yeah, the airship history is in there. My guys are, this is where anti-gravity came from in the modern era. The ancients had it, but in the modern era, the last 2,000 years probably. But I have to kind of disagree with Bosley. I think the Germans were way ahead in a lot of technologies. I think they really were working with ETs. Hermann Oberth said in the Nuremberg trials, we had help from people from other worlds.
I love that quote. I've heard that in a lot of different places.
I have to disagree. I agree with J.P. Farrell. They probably cobbled together a few, discs that floated and wobbled and flew a little bit, but the fields were very destabilized. The Bell generator created a lot of radiation. It was version 1. This was really bad. This is very high technology, but implemented not very well. And
prototypes are going to not always work right?
Did they take them to Antarctica? I don't know, but Antarctica today is swarming with military bases. Why?
Yeah, it's going to be an inconvenient place to put a military base.
It sounds ridiculous. Nazi flying saucers, Hitler in space, on the moon with a swastika moon base. It sounds ridiculous. I agree. But if you do the deep work and all the esoteric work the Nazis were into, the Vril Society, the supposed Vril propulsion workshop with Schauberger and Walter Gerlach and all these guys in there, it kind of makes more sense. I think they were well on their way. I met a guy, I swear on the Holy Bible, whatever that's worth. His father was a 3-star Air Force general. And he said, let me show you something. My Navy SEAL buddies and I blew up the safe. And I said, shit. And I'm looking at this safe. It's all blown up. And he shows me mimeograph documents from the 60s. And you're too young to remember, but we had mimeographs when I was a kid at school.
It wasn't with the carbon paper?
Right.
I got in trouble in school once because, when a teacher tells you write this 800 times, I used carbon paper and I got caught.
We all tried that. It didn't.
I got caught.
You got caught.
None beat me up.
It's the blue mimeograph. It's blue. And so he had thousands of these documents. My jaw hit the floor. And they were all the Hanabu craft with U.S. Air Force serial numbers on them.
Oh, I'd love to see those kind of documents.
I begged him to give me some, but no one would believe them anyway. Some teenager could cobble them up I could cobble them up. I'm an artist and a writer. That's not proof. Documents aren't proof. People say they can authenticate it. Well, who's checking the fact checkers on that? And so I just defer. Greer and I had this argument. I said documents just aren't. They're somewhat interesting, but they're not. It's like the Admiral Wilson documents. That was a nothing burger. You needed a naval officer to say these are genuine. No one.
I have an ongoing dispute and argument, and Richard Dolan is not a big fan of mine, because what I've said about the Wilson documents is that if you really listen to Richard Dolan, all 8 hours or 10 hours of him trying to prove that there is something like 12 anonymous sources he uses throughout the presentation try to prove to you they're real. And my point is, if you need 12 anonymous sources to say something is real, it's probably fake. And Admiral Wilson himself denied that they're real, said that they're a work of fiction.
Problem.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone made a big to-do about it, and I thought it was just more documents, more stories. There's no corroboration of it.
Yeah, I thought it was a nothing burger, and certainly not the UFO leak of the century when nobody can prove it's real.
Richard Dolan's early work was foundational. He did a great job. He coined the term space program.
I agree.
And
breakaway civilization.
And says, I have proof. It's not proof. It's stupid. These people are stupid. He makes his living. I understand he's going to make a buck. I think he was a pet therapist beforehand. He was a therapist of some type.
I don't know. I got a background check report on him that said that he worked at a heating and air conditioning company or something. I don't know if it's accurate.
Thing, but whatever. It's like I knock him a lot too because he deserves it. He's joined the Chris Elizondo Club.
Well, see that there's common ground there. There's some things we can agree on, and one thing is Richard Dolan is a kind of a joke. And by the way, we caught him with that CIA anonymous deathbed confession. But we caught him. He interviewed a dead man, John. He interviewed a man in 2014 that was dead in 2008, according to other reports. I don't know how he did that. So, and he said that he was going to. He said,
time
John,
travel is a reality. So
he said, John, I'm going to get on top of this and I'll make a statement about it. That was 6 months ago. So every chance I get, I remind him, you were supposed to make a statement. How did you interview a dead man in 2014 that died in 2008? And by the way, even if the guy wasn't dead, he was a fraud and a fake source brought by Linda Moulton Howe. And we have proof of that. We're going to release it someday.
It's crazy. It's like somebody might have leaked those Wilson documents just to get everyone's fur and everyone's pants in a twist. And boy, did it work. And I was like, well, these documents are interesting. And I checked the Navy. Actually, my dad was alive. We checked some of the people in it. And they were legit. And so, but no one came forward. So it's just a interesting story with documents, and the problem is, people like Dolan, I'm really afraid that somebody knocked on his door and said, we're going to kill you and all your family. Here's a briefcase with $1 million. What are you going to choose? And, anyone would take the $1 million and then, okay, this is what you could talk about. And this is what you can't talk about.
I've heard this payoff thing before. Yeah,
oh, no, that's a common tactic. The CIA used to do it with world leaders. They go into some banana republic, help the, warlord overthrow the government. And then now he's their leader and they pay him off with tons of cash. That's a common way to blackmail somebody. I mean, a threat followed by a lot of money. It works like a charm. That's Intel 101 stuff, So, I mean, these people that have joined the UAP thing, it's very suspicious. Ross Coulthard and all these senators, where they promised money and fame and more exposure. Any politician wants that. Any reporter, newscaster, or he's a journalist. My God, they'll do anything for stories and access. I mean, Ross Coulthard comes out on some video and says, I talked to an Australian general who saw a glowing orb over a military base. Who gives a flying fuck? The hardware is not the issue. That's a whole nother agenda, is this hardware, the sighting. Oh, Richard Dolan talks about sightings, the 1968 sightings. Still, it's a distraction. It's an obvious distraction. The sightings aren't important. The politics of UFOs is important. The dirty laundry, the deals, the potentialities, the skullduggery, the really crimes against humanity level possibilities. That's what they want to distract the public from. That's where I'm getting flack from. The people don't want to hear that. They want to be on space kitty cat videos and they want you to be nice to everybody. And it's like, no, I won't.
Oh, well, this is one reason why I respect you, because I get the same thing, because I don't play the game with these UFO fluffers, any of them. If they're lying or they're selling fake shit, I say these people are lying, their education's fake or whatever it is, they're selling fake shit and call people out. And there seems to be this unwritten rule, don't you think, that all the UFO guys should play nice together and just help each other sell their bullshit and not, go against a guy if you think he's selling bullshit?
Obviously it's an agenda by the CIA and whoever to keep the disclosure movement bitterly fighting amongst ourselves. And so I try to stay out of the fight. I do come down on, Chris Liu and Dolan and Ross Coulthard and others, because they're so public, and I see them for what they are, and I understand the concepts of paid informants and blackmail and threats and promises of fame and wealth. I see it corrupt people all the time. I'm in that world, elite world, where I have friends, very wealthy friends, who are like, well, the senator's not going to clean up the bay next to the harbor. And next fall, lo and behold, he passes a bill and the harbor and bay get cleaned up and the housing prices go up. Things get done with money.
Yeah, you're right about that. And you know what?
I believe him. But, there are others who work their way up. I met a lovely woman who was a senator running for Senate, and she lost $35 million of her own money. And she was at a fundraiser.
That's commitment.
I said, why are you fundraising to go again and losing all this money? And she's like, it's so addictive. The fame, the power, perceived power, because they're really not that powerful. The Congress and the White House, they're not that powerful. It's the deep state, people in the shadows calling the big shots on the big.
Well, don't you think, because you're wealthy, don't you think wealthy people get bored? No offense, but you became a race car driver and you could have done anything. You could have done anything because you were so wealthy.
Something I was interested in. I was always a gearhead.
Yeah, but I guess after you have all the money in the world, the next thing that would probably excite you or make you, get out of bed in the morning is power and more power, right? It's power is addicting.
That's not my bag, baby.
Not you. I'm saying a lot of wealthy people.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
It's the ultimate secret power, and wealth is the ultimate aphrodisiac. And you see it. I mean, look at Elon Musk. I mean, he's just high on his own pheromones. Is nuttier than a.
Don't you think he's doing great work in rockets, though? Because I happen to I grew up building rockets, and I know it is, but he's doing it better. He's doing it better than anybody else, though. You got to say that he's doing it better than anybody. Better than NASA ever did. It's
a massive cover. And, okay, they're cheap delivery vehicles. I understand that they're cheap, and he's talking about a rocket that goes from the United States to Asia to deliver a payload, and I'm like, okay, they have anti-gravity stuff that can do that in 5 minutes. He's doing all this rocket stuff, and it's a major. It's a functional thing, but it's also a major distraction. Chemical rockets, you can't mine asteroids in space with chemical rockets. J.P. Farrell was right about that. Daniel List had him on, and they were like, "There's no way you can do that."
I just heard that, and I agree with it. I agree with it 100%. You can't
base mining,
you can't store enough liquid.
Yeah, you have to add all these things
to
up.
do that.
Yeah, you have to add up the little things. And most people don't want to do the heavy lifting or the long hours of homework. I've always been a writer, historian, and a researcher, and I've always read books, and I've always been, chariots of the gods and, megaliths and things like that all throughout my life. In fact, when I was a racing driver, there's long hours of boredom between practice. I was always reading books.
Yeah.
Sci-fi also, but also history and everything I could lay my hands on. My girlfriend at the time called me Mr. Sponge.
Yeah, I was kind of like
because
that.
I could not.
Reader, yeah.
Yeah, I just could not. I wanted to learn everything about everything.
That's a good way to be. That's a good way to be. And I've noticed that about you, that you seem to have this. You sponge everything up in conspiracy land, and then you form your own conclusions, which I think is a healthy way to do it. But I will say, I think you've been too kind to some people, but I let it go because I agree with you on so many other things. I go, that guy's a nutter. Why is he listening to him? Right? But then I probably listen to some guys you think are nutters. Everybody's got their own, tolerance level.
That everyone in the disclosure movement, from the big people to the small people, are very interesting, and they all have interesting points to consider. And that's
so many great characters. It's like a character, right? You're a character in this movie.
Book, so and it's like, I don't want to read this. it's like, yeah, I want to hear what everyone has to say, because to formulate any kind of, it's like I write my books. I learn everything I can about the occult and Nazism and World War II, and I already knew a lot of that stuff, but I roamed up on it because I want to speak from knowledge. And yes, historical novels, you can create a lot of fantasy and stuff to go along with it, but that also, it springs from, something real in my mind. And so It's the same thing with the disclosure movement. You gotta, in my view, you gotta consider everyone. There have been people on my Twitter feed and they sent me a little something or a link or something. I'm like, holy shit, this is really interesting. And I tell them that. I said, this is really
and you can go down that rabbit hole for 3 days. I never heard sometimes.
It. Yeah. And that's how, everyone learns that way. All these big historians and everybody, they all learn from other people in books and archives and things like that. You gotta cast this huge galactic net. And so everyone's like, oh, how can you listen to Simon Parkes? And I'm like, a lot of times he has some very interesting things to say. It doesn't, I don't give a damn about his Trump connections or anything like that. But
well, don't you think that though
he's not a dark person. He's a very benevolent person.
Don't you think though that there is this? I call it UFO disease, right? And it's what you mentioned about Dolan. Like when Dolan first came out, he did some really respectable foundational work. But then what happens, and maybe the same for Simon Parkes, and to be honest with you, as somebody that you and I disagree on, is Dr. Stephen Greer. I think a lot of these guys, including these three, when they first come out, they do their best work, right? And then what happens is they work the conference circuit. They've made the money that they could from their first good work. But then everybody tires of the same old stories that they've been telling for years, and they need new material. And then it gets diluted, it gets watered down, it gets not so true or not so evidentiary supported, supported by evidence. I think a lot of these guys suffer from that. Isn't that a thing here? Because I've seen it with many people. Cliff Stone, and who's the guy with the assessment? Robert Dean. Many of these guys, when they first came out, you listen to them and you go, this sounds really credible. He's got a really great, compelling story, and this seems logical. But then, like with Robert Dean, as years went on, towards the end, he's talking about he was a pharaoh in his past life, and he was Alexander the Great in his past life, and all these crazy, weird things that he starts talking about that have nothing to do with the good work, the compelling work that he once did. Isn't that because of the financial motive? They got to keep coming up with new stuff, right?
I mean, that it's a very broad topic. Everyone burns out. Anyone who's been at the UFO game, I'm tired. I'm burned out.
Me too, and I'm a youngin' here compared to some of you veterans, right?
Who can blame people for burning out? They've been threatened, more than likely. The CIA sends them fake whistleblowers on occasion.
I think I've been a victim of that. I think I for sure have been a victim of that. They truly believe
they're reporting a true story when the guys at the CIA in Langley are laughing. Everyone can succumb to that. I mean, certainly I can too. My wife tells me, she's ex-CIA. I mean, she tells me how it's all done. And, my grandfather was OSS in the CIA, and I've had cousins in the CIA and NSA and DIA, ONI. My best friend was in the ONI. He was Navy.
Your family is just full of alphabet soup people. Oh, yeah. That is crazy. Yeah, that's why I thought you were Illuminati, because you got so many of these connections.
There's only about 150 of us alive at any given time. We're pretty small. I've been told by military people that we've had 40 spooks in the Mellon family since World War II, or maybe slightly before, Navy intelligence and the like. That's a lot for a small family.
Well, maybe not, though, because don't you think it would be logical to get a family that is wealthy and very well educated and use them as resource?
Thank you.
There you go. You guys are incredibly well educated, aren't you? Most of you.
Yeah, I mean,
because you have the money to spend 8 years getting an education if you choose to.
But remember that schools teach mostly a bullshit curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in self-education myself.
Yeah, literature
after a certain point,
fine. Basic math is fine. English is fine. Arts, music, that's all fine. But when you get into physics, math, and history, that's been tainted. Mm-hmm. So you can go to Harvard. I mean, I know some Harvard PhD types that they're my friends. but they're idiots.
My father used to say,
have
PhD.
a concept of what the fuck a UFO is, or they always say to me, "Oh, if the aliens were real, they would have shown themselves by now." And I'm like, "Have you ever heard of the deep state or anything?" And they're like, "No."
My father used to say, "PhD piled higher and deeper."
Right. So, you remember Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street?
Yeah, I love that movie.
He says to Charlie Sheen something very smart. He says, "Fuck all the Harvard PhDs and grad students. Give me somebody who's really smart from the streets, who's hungry, and I'll turn him into a successful businessman."
I believe that too. I absolutely believe
basically, it doesn't matter what your background is. You're smart. You're not an idiot. I wouldn't be on here if you were.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Listen, I'm a self-made man and a self-educated man.
Right.
I quit school at 16, and then I went back later when I realized I needed to learn more. I've always been everything I got. I started business myself. My family was poor growing up. I did my best to educate myself and make my way in the world without handouts. And I used to feel towards people like you like a certain kind of way, like rich people.
Oh, sure.
But then I got to know some rich people who recognized that I was hungry and smart and wanted to help me. And a few very wealthy people helped me learn some things along my way. And I no longer have that chip on my shoulder because I realized people are people, whether they were born wealthy or they were self-made.
It's the same thing across society. Mm-hmm. It's 10% or 20% that are jerks and selfish and small-minded, but most people are good people. I said in my interview, one of my interviews, if these really elite 300 families, all the people really knew the truth about what was going on with the deep state and UFOs and our Swiss cheese history and they would take to the streets with guns because they're moral, ethical people. They truly believe when they give to the World Wildlife or some foundation or something, they're doing good.
That goes to their
money is
actual
going
charity,
to the deep state. And so everyone's like, all the rich are assholes. That's not true. I know a lot of these very, very wealthy people. And, I didn't like people like the Koch brothers. They were assholes. But there are other people
trying to use their money to manipulate everyone.
Yeah, and there are those types. But for every one of those, there's 9 other people that are really decent people. And they really do want to help out people. But the system we have really prevents
Bluetooth mode.
Sorry about that.
It prevents people from rising up the ranks in our caste system. It's very difficult. And when you start to, you start to get up in the hundreds of millions, you start to draw the attention of people in the deep state who are like, how can we control this person?
Yeah, they got too much money. They're too free with their mouth, right?
And so that's where you get into the Elon Musks and the Facebook kid and other things. There's also, you have to remember, the CIA MK Ultra mind control thing is very real. It's not hard to do. I've seen brainwashing firsthand. Now I won't
that's interesting.
You is where I saw it, but I had a friend who was in a cult, and then I posed as someone I wasn't. I sat in on some of these, groups of people, and I saw brainwashing work like a charm. You get desperate people and you feed them hope and religion and
you love bomb them.
Yeah, like these, and they buy into it like nobody's business. And I couldn't believe it. I saw it firsthand. I couldn't believe it. And so when everyone's like, "Oh, brainwashing," you can't do that. It happens every day. You do it on the TV, the radio. You go to the church on Sunday. I'm sorry, religion is the biggest mind control vehicle on the planet.
Did you know that there's a famous mentalist magician named Darren Brown from England, and they did an experiment on television where he hypnotized somebody, and they gave them a gun with blanks in it, and they told them to go down the street and shoot this person, and the person did it. Time and time again, he was able to get people to do that.
Yeah,
when people say mind control is not real, I just point them to that and say, go look at that.
Oh no, we're all mind controlled. I mean, it's like every time I see a Pop-Tart commercial, I'm like, ooh, Pop-Tart.
Yeah. Listen, we have a great question.
Budweiser, it's like, ooh, cold beer and a Pop-Tart.
This is a great question, and I'd like to hear
manipulation is easy.
I'd like to hear your opinion on this. Patrick Sheehan with a kind and generous $9.99 super chat supporting the show wants to know, what new author or book does John Warner recommend we read over the vacation? I'd like to know, like, what are some of the things you're reading or interested in reading, or what's on your reading list?
Yeah, I'm a poorly read author, and I admit that. But the writer, I forget his name, he did the book called All the Light We Cannot See, which is about World War II, a French village in World War II. He's a very good writer.
That's Anthony Dower.
Me. He's very good, and I recommend his books. And I forget his name. I got the book right.
Anthony Dower.
Oh, here it is.
Doerr. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the Light We Cannot See is Anthony
Dower. As
far
as some good history, Freddie Silva is very good.
Oh, The Missing Lands.
Yeah, that's interesting. He's very good. That kind of stuff. I don't have time for novels, but I do have time to read that guy's.
Some guys you make time for, right?
I do.
I'm trying to make time for your book, and I got halfway in. I'll admit it to you. I try to read the whole book before we talked, but I'm about halfway through. And so far, I'm enjoying it, and I'm forgetting that it's fiction sometimes, because in your book, and then I wanted to ask you about this.
Fiction.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this because there is so many historical accuracy. You got Porsche down to like where he was at certain times in his life. I checked. Yeah. You know where he was, what he was doing, what he was working on as far as Porsche goes, his relationship with the Nazi government, what he did for them,
that's all true.
What he was asked to do. All that is true in your book, even though it's a work of fiction. And it is a great story, though, so far.
Well, his life is actually nonfiction. You mean in Little Anton?
Yeah, Little Anton, yeah.
Yeah, in the new book, he's a character as well, but there's more. You'll enjoy that. It's faster, more exciting, more everything. It's not as long-winded as Little Anton, but it's about his life and times, and that's all true. And Hitler knew who he was, and Porsche didn't know who Hitler was. Porsche thought Hitler was an idiot, but he also knew that's where the money was coming from. And so in German Grand Prix racing, that was everything. But Porsche made out like a bandit, and he did part of the Tiger tank program along with Henschel. He did tank destroyers, and he made parts for airplanes at the Wolfsburg plant, VW plant. And they had 20,000 Russian workers, slaves. And I mentioned that in my new book. I mean, no one in history.
Yeah, so this Little Anton is a series of 3. And I just want to recommend to people.
One story, but it's 3 books.
Just put Little Anton or John Warner in Amazon, and you can pick up his book.
Yeah.
I think so far it's extremely well written and enjoyable, because it's kind of like it strikes me kind of like a James Bond novel, but set during and during World War II. Right?
It's not as serious. It's more tongue in cheek than James Bond. I mean, B is a fuck up. Little Anton, just skim through it, but read book 3 because that's pretty exciting. It's too long. I admit it. It's way too long. But it was my first.
We have an audience member that bought all your books a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you. All profits to wounded veterans charities.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that John you do a hunt every year for wounded.
We do a wounded veteran deer hunt at my farm twice a year, and those people are wonderful, and they have some interesting stories about UFOs in the military to tell me.
I heard a lot from Vietnam vets about UFOs in Vietnam that I find really compelling and interesting.
One. We had a guy in his 70s. He was in Vietnam. I tell this story I told it to Regina Meredith, but he said, "Look, I know who you are, and I know what you're into. I have friends out there in the intel business." I said, "Okay, well, I understand. My wife's CIA." And this is years ago, so at the time she still was. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I know." And he said, "Look, I can't tell you where I was or what my unit was, but I was an Army Ranger in '66 in Vietnam, and there was 350 of us that had special training with the NSA and the CIA." And Army G2 and other, 3-letter type agencies that don't exist anymore, but probably do.
Yeah, you know how that works.
Yeah, I've heard the OSS is still a small department at the CIA.
Oh, wow. They just go away publicly.
They never get rid of anything. And so he said, "Look, I was with a 350-man battalion. We were in Laos. We were over the border. We were dropped in at night. And we were going after this target. I can't tell you what it was, still classified. But we got separated, and we had a few firefights with North Vietnamese regulars. They had come down, they figured out our drop, and somehow they intercepted us. Here's the problem. UFOs, strange lights and UFOs have been following their every move since they parachuted in. He said it was creepy as hell. They were briefed on it, and they said, don't worry, you'll see some strange things in the sky. Don't worry about it. Well, this guy got separated with a group of his guys. They got in a firefight. And I think he said 12 or 15 of them made it back to the fire base or whatever it was. And the rest are just missing. And they said, well, go find them. And so they got some other troops, and they went looking for them. They found nothing.
No bodies.
No bodies, no Vietnamese, no nothing, no gear, no guns, no backpacks, no nothing. And he said, shit. And they got back to Saigon, and they were in some hangar, and they were special forces. And so the CIA and he said the NSA was there, and he couldn't figure out why. And they fucking chewed their asses out. Where the fuck are these guys? What happened? What did you do? Blah, blah, blah. Tell us everything you saw. And so shit, he was like, he was told never to talk about it. And then he started talking to other vets years later who saw UFOs, and they said, all of a sudden there was a UFO. All of a sudden our guys went into the jungle that way, and all of a sudden they were just gone. And then he went to Vietnam. He said, I think in the early 2000s, because a lot of Vietnam vets, a few, moved back to Vietnam because it's a beautiful place to live.
It's cheap. Yeah.
Wonderful food, and the people are wonderful. And he said he met some North Vietnamese regular veterans. And he said, listen, let me tell you my story. And they said, shit, we had missing people too. And we couldn't find anything.
So it was both sides had the same phenomenon happen. And these people disappeared completely. They didn't find the guns. They didn't find the bodies. They didn't find uniforms,
so I talked to
equipment.
Two guys, and they said, we saw the gray aliens that are on the TV. We saw them in a B-52 crash site. And then another guy said, we think they were taking our guys underground. And so
that's bizarre.
The speculation is the Greys were experimenting on dead and live bodies underground for genetics. And of course, maybe this is where a lot of our MIA go. Because remember,
still an awful lot of missing. Yeah.
Right. And in wars and everything, there's always hundreds of thousands of missing. Where did they go? Now, this also gets into the occult and Babylon workings and, mass death rituals, which, certain interdimensional beings and ETs gather, energy from the mass death and all that stuff. It gets super weird and creepy. But it does.
According to Google, there are still 1,584 completely remaining missing.
I'm sure there's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. They just don't tell us shit about Vietnam.
Yeah.
Remember all the body counts? You're too young, but on the CBS.
No, my father's a Vietnam veteran. He was a helicopter mechanic. And boy, did he used to tell me, he told me you can't, he's part of the reason. He's part of my problem, I guess. He's like, you can't trust anything the government tells you. Nothing that happened in Vietnam. They didn't tell you the truth about any of it. And all those missing people, they didn't even try to get them back. He lost friends, Yeah,
he lost heroin money. The CIA gained control of the Golden Triangle, heroin money. My uncle, Stacy Lloyd, was with the American Information Service in Laos.
Well, look at this. Walter Bosley. Walter Bosley is here
family member. So, I mean, everyone knows about the heroin part. They made a movie about it with Denzel Washington too. It was much bigger than that.
Yeah, they were shipping caskets back full of heroin, right?
Oh, they were shipping whole plane loads with nothing but heroin.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of this body bag. That was the little dealers and shit. That was nothing. No, they shipped over shiploads.
Whole cargo, army cargo planes, right?
A cargo ship has a double hull for safety. Most ships have the double hull for safety, modern ships. You can pack whatever you want in there. That's how Onassis reportedly, Jackie Kennedy's husband, Mr. Onassis, the shipper, brought in heroin for Joe Kennedy.
Yeah, Walter Bosley is here. Walter
Joe
Bosley,
Kennedy Sr. with
he mentioned, Mr. Bosley, he mentioned your book and how he used, some of the stuff from your book about the 1890s airship mystery. So shout out to Walter Bosley from the Walter Bosley channel. Well, it's good to see you both here. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a Walter's a brilliant guy. I mean, that story he dug out, I don't think anyone else in the world could have done it. I mean, Busby was good with the book. Another guy wrote a book, but Bosley put it all together with the occult, and it made sense. It takes some brain power. I had to read a couple of them twice, but I got it.
I think I need to read some of his books 3 times to truly get it.
Yeah, I recommend.
They're very dense. They're good, but
yeah, Peter Levenda, the SS and the Occult. I mean, those are all good, and they make sense. But it only makes sense to people if you read all the books and then do a lot of deep thinking and consider the big picture. Otherwise, it just sounds like Nazi UFOs on the moon and Babylon, mystics and Satanists. It just sounds like Hollywood, the Iron Sky movies, which they parody.
I enjoyed that, though. I did enjoy
They're
that.
making 3 movies. What are they trying to tell us?
Maybe there's a little truth in that.
For Hollywood, Star Wars, Star Trek. What the fuck? It's all fascism in space. I mean, what are they trying to tell us? I wonder. Is some of that true out there? People say that there's breakaway Germans out in space. They're.
I've heard that so many different times. Yeah, and it's an interesting concept.
But
it's an interesting concept. Yeah,
because they really had been genocided. The German people, Germanic peoples, the Visigoths, and everybody had been attempted genocide on them by the Romans and everyone else throughout history, and they finally had enough. And if you read the history, you're like, shit, they really went after the Germans. Why?
Someone asked in the live chat earlier, and I know that you're like a walking encyclopedia of World War II history and knowledge, and I wanted to pick your brain about this. The various theories that much of the German high command escaped to Argentina, and that's after that there was UFO flaps. The Nazi command. Yeah. And someone asked, did you believe that Hitler actually escaped to Argentina? Because there's a lot of conspiracies about that. And, I know they DNA tested what they thought was Hitler's body, and it turned out to be not Hitler. That piece of skull that the Soviets had.
Hitler had 4 doppelgangers, maybe 6. Now,
body doubles, right?
Had 2, and that's confirmed. Every world leader has a doppelganger. I got news for you. All of them, sometimes multiples. That's number one. The Russians found a doppelganger burned up outside the bunker. Hitler and Ava, either they willingly left or they were drugged and taken out of there, because Hitler was worthless to the German and the Nazi party at that time, except as a symbol. And so he was a powerful symbol. So if you drag him, even a dead body, you bury him in Argentina and you make a shrine, which is a story, that's a very powerful motivator for the neo-Nazis in South America, which martyred him. We knew there were many. And so, and they migrated to America and NASA and everything, Project Paperclip. If he did get out alive, you have to remember Hitler was a sick man. He had been on a cocktail of heroin, belladonna, methamphetamines, and other
big things. On meth.
From Dr. Morell, his Dr. Feelgood, for a long time. And his hand shook either from the drugs or he might have had Parkinson's. By all accounts, the last film when he's shaking the hands of the Hitler Youth outside the bunker.
I've seen that many times. Yeah, he looked a mess.
Ava might have survived longer. I don't know. Either he died in transit or he lived for a year or two and then died and they buried him in Argentina somewhere. Who cares? That's not important. The important thing is Project Paperclip and where all the ex-Nazi engineers and physicists and bureaucrats went. And my grandfather, Paul Mellon, in the OSS in Patton, he said he saw a disc-shaped German aircraft in a hangar. And he said,
"This is your grandfather." Yeah, I love that story. Your grandfather.
It was not the.
Your grandfather saw a Russian flying saucer in an aircraft.
No, German.
A German. I'm sorry, not Russian.
Disc-shaped aircraft.
German. Yeah.
He didn't say anything, but he said it was very large, and he said it was not powered by German BMW or Arado jet engines. And because I asked him, even as a college student, I knew about the Flugelrad. And they put jet engines in a circle, and it didn't work. Of course, stupid idea. But they didn't know that until you try it. And so he saw something because he saw V3, and I remember him telling me about transistors because I didn't even remember that until I heard Nick Cook in his book and J.P. Farrell and everyone say the Germans invented transistors. And I thought, shit, that's what my grandfather told me. And chemical lasers. I remember he talking about lasers, and I thought, didn't we invent the lasers? Like, no.
Yeah, in the early 60s. No, apparently Nazis were already ahead.
Transistors.
They were so far ahead of everybody else in technology.
They really were. And we were
30 Olympics. They had television all over Germany.
Well, the Americans invented television first.
Yes, but they perfected it. Yeah.
Yeah. They implemented live broadcast first.
We have a great message here for you from Peter de Havilland with a kind and generous £5 donation. He says, "Good evening from London. A message for John. Your cousin, the late Matthew Mellon, was an old friend of mine until his untimely death in 2018."
Yeah, Matthew was a wonderful, wonderful guy. He was he died tragically.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's Chris's brother. I knew Matthew a little bit better than Chris, and Matthew was a great guy. He died early. I miss him. We all.
Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss. I gotta reconnect with my cousins, because you remember, like, when you were a little kid, your cousins were your first best friends, right? And then you get a little older, you have your own family, and you get busy, and you just don't see them as much.
Yeah.
Great question from Pix that I'm also interested in hearing your opinions on. He says, "Please ask John what he thinks happened to Patton. Was it just an accident, or was there more to it?"
Well, the rumors coincide with my grandfather's story in that Patton was witness to the German Wunderwaffe technology, the rockets, the chemical lasers,
the wonder weapons,
the anti-gravity, the bell, the Nazi bell. And so he knew that. That's why Ike directed him towards Pilsen, because Patton wanted to go to Berlin and end the war, and they were like, "No, we need you to go to Pilsen and secure the SSE-4 division," which he did. And my grandfather knew Patton well. They fox hunted together with General Marshall. They were all chummy. Wild Bill Donovan, that's how he got to know Wild Bill and joined the OSS, is through his fox hunting buddies. And so Patton knew the truth of the German Wunderwaffe, and he knew that it was being transferred. I think they flew it out of Pilsen in DC-4s and DC-6s. I'm trying to remember if the DC-6 was online at that time, but they were long-range aircraft. They refueled in Iceland. Big deal on the East Coast, and they brought it out by train and ship. The Bell and all the mature, nonlinear German physics.
So you think that we got it all?
Oh, we got it all.
We recovered it all.
The high altitude experiments on the Jews and the Russians in the camps. All that.
Well, I knew about that. Yeah, I knew about those space experiments that they were trying to do.
All that genetic stuff that Mengele was doing. The rumor is we got it all, and I bet you we did. Wow. Because America, people forget, America was into euthanasia and eugenics well before the Nazis were.
Yeah, that's a scary subject.
That's a sad part of America history. It's disgusting, but not euthanasia. But
so your dad knew Patton too, then, right? Is that what you said? Did I mishear you, or was it grandfather?
My grandfather did, and so
geez, your whole family has been at like. I'm going to write a time travel novel about your family, because at all these crossroads,
no one would believe it. I swear to God.
Think about this. At all these weird crossroads of history, your family has been there. Your grandfather and Patton, your father and Richard Nixon, right?
Yeah, we were best friends.
All of this strange stuff. And I wanted to know if you could go into a little more detail about what your father told you about UFOs, because I know that I mentioned.
Let me answer Patton.
Oh yeah, let me finish. Yeah, the Patton first. Yeah,
Patton knew everything. The war. Remember, Patton believed in reincarnation. He knew about the occult. They never talk about that in movies, but Patton was into theosophy and Manly P. Hall. He was out there in Pasadena, California, where all that was happening. The Jack Parsons and stuff. He was sort of around there. He lived not far from Jack Parsons. General Patton did, because my girlfriend in college had a house in out there, and we used to go by Patton's house all the time. So Patton knew and believed, more importantly, the true history of the world: Atlantis, Lemuria, the sons of Belial. He knew all that history because he knew the truth of the world. This is why he pushed his troops so hard. Because even though he had high casualties, he knew that death was an illusion, and that all those young boys whom he cared about would just reincarnate. Their death is an illusion.
That's interesting.
The German high command only feared Patton. They didn't.
I've heard that.
any
I've
other
heard that.
general.
I've heard
Yep.
that mentioned in many books that they were paranoid about Patton
Yep.
coming for them, and they weren't so concerned with a lot of the other generals.
No.
That's interesting.
And probably the Prussian generals who were occultists knew he was one of them. And they were like, uh-oh, we've got a problem with this guy. He knows the truth of the world and how the universe works, and he's going to push his troops to the max because he knows they'll just reincarnate. Their death is an illusion. And so Patton knew a shit ton. And I think probably he was assassinated, although it was a very weird accident. It didn't kill him. He, right away, it was a long, painful death. Maybe he was killed, or maybe it was just an accident. But whatever happened, the result was done. He was a liability. He had a big mouth, like I do. He just he spoke his mind.
He was quite a character. I love that movie with what is the actor? I can't remember the actor that played
George C. Scott.
And George C. Scott. My dad loved World War II movies. That's one of the reasons, John, that I'm so interested in World War II, because when I was a child, my father had all of these. He used to tape all these war movies off of the television and dub out the commercials, and then on a Saturday night he would sit and watch 18 hours of World War II movies, and I would watch his stuff with him, And Lord Ludicrous Plaid, this is another good one, wants to know your opinion about Gary McKinnon, because he loves the story. And thank you for your support, Lord Ludicrous Plaid. And you're familiar with that, the English guy who claimed to hack into the NASA computers and find solar.
Yeah, he was Scottish.
Yeah, he's Scottish. You're right. I'm sorry. What is your opinion of that? I find him to be credible. I mean,
yeah, I do too, because in an TV interview, he said, "Look, I'm just a hacker. I don't know anything about UFOs or the space
or care. Yeah, program. But he happened to find that stuff.
I don't really care, but this is what I found," and I think that makes him very credible. I think we're in an age where it's obvious we've got some presence in space. We have had since the 60s. Or by some accounts, the late 50s, NSA were on the moon with the Germans. I don't know, but that's a story. And I think we need to come to grips with that we have been out in space. How big it is, I don't know. Time will have to tell us that. But I think I will say this: the SSP vets, they have a point. They have a few points that are worthy of consideration, and that is a lot of their stories are very, very complicated and complex, and they all cross-pollinate. Now, that's not easy to do. A group of people just didn't get together in California and say, and a lot of them have, they knock heads, they have problems. That's almost impossible to do in my book, is to fake that whole narrative. It's just impossible. You can't do it. Now, everything is possible in the universe. I understand that. But it would be extremely difficult. And to what end? None of them are making money. I talked to a few of them. I think they're very smart and interesting people. They're not making money. They're poor.
Well, some of them do. Some of them, the ones that reach the top tier.
Well, let's not.
Very good, and a few others.
Mention some of those, but
because they're not credible. Yeah.
But and they have a problem with him too, by and large. But, I'm not going to bash anyone because it's just not my thing per se. But, the thing is, in my view, we have to start considering the wider picture on everything. And that means a lot of people are going to have to deal with what other people say, even though they don't like what other people say or even believe it. But, you have to remember 35 years ago, 1980s, I was barely reading a UFO book or two, and I would, watch a film or something. If you believed in the gray aliens abducting humans, you were a fringe, nut job, crazy, you're an idiot. Now that's UFO 101, and, now they're calling all these new people crazy, they're fringe, and they're fringe in the disclosure movement, which is all fringe. It's ridiculous. It's 25 years ago, they were calling Dolan and Greer and everyone. They were all, those guys are nuts, and now they're like, conservative.
They are, yeah, compared to some of the other out there
narratives
stuff.
Now. And it's like, you have to see history over a long period of time, and that's, older people like me, we've seen this shit before. I've seen this Project Blue Book bullshit UAP task force, Pentagon UAP office bullshit before. They tried.
Blue Book didn't work out so well for disclosure.
It never works out. They're delaying the inevitable, Stephen. They're just
I think you're right.
Delaying tactics. Scorched earth policy, get the disclosure movement infighting bitterly, leak out bullshit. It's the same old intel war. But for some reason, they have to start disclosing stuff. Otherwise, none of this would be happening.
They would have said anything.
Would have come alive, and the Nimitz thing would never have come out. So they're getting pressure internally to do something. And they have to do something, even though it's next to nothing, what they're doing.
Drip, drip, drip.
It's still the subject. And so
here's another great question.
Subject.
And I'm sorry to be like, I don't mean to rush you, but there's so many great questions in the live chat, and you're like a walking encyclopedia of this stuff. So we want to take our best.
Beware, kids, beware. Oh, man.
So Properly Paranoid with a kind and generous $5 super chat. Thank you for your kindness and generosity and support of the show. Mr. Warner, do you think, what do you think happened to Dr. Hans Kammler? Do you think he supervised the production of the Glock or the Bell, the famous Nazi Bell project?
Now, I've just read the new book on Hans Kammler. I chatted with the authors over the email for months, and they did a very good job with it. I forget that, it has his picture on the cover of the book. You can look it up. And I've studied everything. He has a cameo in my new book, Lion, Tiger, Bear. And the next book is going to be mostly about Hans Kammler. He's got 10 different deaths. He was cited at 10 different places after the war. He was scrubbed from history very well. I think probably, most likely, he got on one of those planes in Pilsen with the Army G2 and the OSS people. Probably sat next to my grandfather and had a martini and flew to the United States. Or he went down to Bavaria and joined the rat line through the Vatican, through Spain and Portugal, and got on a U-boat and went to Argentina. If he was in Argentina, he definitely, there are several stories that, unproven, but the stories are that he was seen at NASA in the early 60s with Debus and Dornberger and von Braun and others. I think that's highly likely because Martin Bormann had tons of Nazi treasure, trillions in today's money. They had it at Banco Tornquist in Argentina. And of course, Juan Perón and, Eva Perón, they got their cut of that, And there's still tons of Nazi loot probably down there and also in Switzerland with the Octagon group, which is hard to find any information on. They spell it with an O, Octagon. And it's a Templar cross. You connect it, and it's an octagon. But that's where all, the Nazis found, the Anarchy found Anarchy treasures, the Holy Grail, perhaps with Otto Skorzeny in southern France, all the Cathar, Knights Templar Cathar, those kind of stashes. They had tons of it, and it's still circulating the world. A lot of it's in the U.S. Everyone's like, oh, where's all that missing artwork? And it's like, well, go look at some Russian dachas and probably some homes of Committee of 300 families, and you'll find a lot of that missing art. It's all around the world with rich people.
Rich people got to hang it in their living room, right? Some priceless work of art.
I've never seen anything, and I'm not an art expert to see that something.
Isn't it interesting though that the Nazis stole so much of the art and culture, and so little of it was recovered after the war? So it's all got to be somewhere. It's all got to be somewhere.
It's everywhere, Stephen. The blacks. The deep state black slush fund was started with money from Rockefeller, my grandfather for sure, and other guys, and some Nazi money. Now they've been able to do big bank fraud, most likely big bank fraud and other things, funding streams, drugs, and horrible things to supplement that. But I bet they have unlimited trillions in the deep state. Money is not the problem. Money is not the issue. Catherine Austin Fitts dug it all out, but I assure you, through the networks of Switzerland and the royal family of England and all this stuff, there's no money shortage for anyone in the deep state. Not a bit.
Yeah, they just find black budget money, right?
They create money. Big banks create money. They print their own money. That's one of the big reasons for inflation. I believe that.
Oh, sure. I've been following the money supply
Yeah,
recently.
none of the other explanations make any sense.
I'm wondering how these politicians and everybody don't know what the problem is when they're printing trillions of dollars.
Some of them know. They know.
Yeah.
But they can't talk about it. They have to talk about non sequiturs. Well, I can't speak to that, so let me talk about this. It's like what Lou Elizondo does. He's like, well, I can't speak to that UFO that you saw out in the parking lot, but, my Aunt Carrie in West Virginia, she bakes apple pie, and it looks like a UFO, and we used to throw the pie pans around. And he goes down this dirt road. And get the question.
I wanted to get back to, we're running out of time, but I definitely, listen, this history stuff, I could just do this for 5 hours, but people really want me to. I had a few requests because of your outspoken nature about Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo. Here's the problem that I have with Lou Elizondo. He claims that he's a disclosure advocate, and then he makes these bombshell statements like, we have captured craft, we have biological samples, we have all these things, but then he won't tell us the rest of it. And to me, and then he'll point to his NDA. I have to be very careful here. It's like a dance with him. And to me, if you got the goods on alien biological samples, and let's say he does have NDAs and clearance problems if he talks, but wouldn't they be upset with him for just saying that much? Just as upset as they would be as if he told us who has the biological samples, where they were obtained, what happened to them, what the outcome was of the study of them, and where they're at now. It makes no sense that he does this dance, because if
that's answered your own question. He doesn't make any sense. He's a trained counterintelligence officer, but the problem is, my O&I friends, they say, we know Lou very well, and we know his reputation. And I said, well, what's your advice? This is years ago. And they said, steer clear and don't believe a word that comes out of his mouth.
Wow. And coming from somebody like you, I think
they don't know why someone like Chris Mellon, my cousin, would even be buddies with this guy. They're polar opposites. I find that very strange. Mellons don't hang out with ex-army counterintelligence in-country, interrogation specialists, spooks. Chris has to, because of his former work, and he's always once intel, always intel. And so they're an odd couple. It's so goofy and weird and disturbing, because the things that are leading the American public is misleading them. It's atrocious, because it's giving more and more credibility to this story of all the dirty laundry of the military industrial complex and the IC and the corporations and the government, and all the military branches have their own black ops portions that have stained the reputation of the Army, Air Force, Marines, and Navy, because most of those people are upstanding, patriotic citizens. I've known a lot of them. I met all the crew of the USS John Warner submarine. My God, the captain and I laughed about it with the...
That's another part of history that
I said, there's a 0-point energy generator in the hull, isn't there, Captain? I'll bet it goes 100 knots underwater. And he just laughed and said, that was really nice to meet you.
And he walked away. Yeah. But back to Elizondo, do you really believe, because there's a few possibilities here. Either he's controlled disclosure and they're trying to craft the narrative their way, the way they would prefer it to be dripped out to the American public, like he's a paid, almost disinformation agent. He was officially a counterintelligence guy.
He is.
Do you believe that he is paid by some deep, dark part of the government that has access to the UFO secrets to try to control the narrative? Do you believe that he's in on it?
I mean, the DIA, he's DIA and CIA, so is Chris. But look, Chris and Lou, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. I have nothing personal against either of them. I'm just...
Well, one's your cousin, so I would hope not. Yeah.
And it's, for Lou, some of it's the money and fame. That's certainly not something. Chris is a very private person. He doesn't want fame. He's doing this. I think they're both doing it out of a sense of patriotism. And here's why. I think they truly believe what they were told by their bosses. And there is a grain of truth, as we and I discussed earlier, that the American people will panic and we will have violent protests and suicides and collapse of religions and things like that. They have a point. But what they're doing is not the way to do it, because they're lying and they're skewing it in a way to distract, and and that's just giving further. My heart is sinking because it's giving me more and more, circumstantial evidence that all these crimes have been committed, especially a human trafficking component to the secret space program. That's horrific to consider.
Yeah.
I hate that. I mean, I lose sleep. I've puked in sinks. I mean, it's disgusting.
Well, speaking of crimes,
they may not believe that. They may not believe. Chris said he doesn't believe the wild stuff. He said that to me.
Yeah, he said you're into too far into the wild stuff, like Tom DeLonge.
I said, Chris, even if 10% of that is true, it is absolutely astounding. You can't ignore some of this stuff. He just said, no, you and Tom DeLonge. And I was like, okay, I'm insulted. I mean, Tom DeLonge may, he's not an activist. He's in bed with the CIA. And I don't know, maybe they blackmailed him too. I mean, it's just obvious.
Well, speaking of crimes,
Tom DeLonge, Lou Elizondo are heroes. And I'm like,
yeah,
are you kidding? These people
you mentioned crimes though, and I don't want to put you in a tight position, but I have said that the TTSA came out to investors in a press conference or mock press conference, and they said, we're going to build a revolutionary spaceship with a revolutionary power source that's going to change the world, as they were soliciting, investor money.
Those ships had already been built.
Yeah, but they didn't produce anything for the investor money. So my point is, isn't that investor fraud, and shouldn't they have to answer for that, both Chris and Lou, because they were part of the organization? They just sort of walked away and went and left Tom holding the bag going, oh, we didn't say nothing about building a spaceship. Tom did that, and nobody asked them questions about that. And that bothers me. They do media appearances. Why doesn't anybody say, hey, where's the spaceship you promised investors? Where'd all the money, $30 million go?
Those guys
nobody knows.
They're above the law.
Like a CIA person would be.
Right. Anyone government or military is above the law. In a sense, the law, sadly, and Jordan Maxwell speaks to this, who I think is a great researcher. And he said, look, the law protects the system, the legal system. That's its primary function. It protects corporations, politicians, powerful, rich people, elites, and everyone else gets short shrift. And that's why, and the prison system is just slave labor. It is slave labor.
Well, yeah, we saw Kamala Harris trying to keep people in prison so that she could use them to fight wildfires.
Everyone who says, if you trying to drag people into court is impossible. You couldn't get near Chris Mellon. He has national security get out of jail free cards. They all do.
So is it a bit like the recent revelations that CIA people were caught with pedophile stuff on their computers and doing pedophile things, and they were never prosecuted because they might, if they were forced to testify, be forced to give away secrets? Is that why they get a pass? Chris and Lou Elizondo? Yeah, they get a pass because of the national security stuff?
Yeah, they can't go to court.
So they can run any scam they want? Like, is that how it works? Within reason, I guess, right? They're just going to get a pass.
This is the state of play in America. I've lost all faith in the government in America. I still love the military that's not the black part, the deep state part, but I love it. But it's just a shame. And people go through their daily lives and they're like, well, that's just the way things are. And I'm like, I don't think so. Somebody said, an ET said, purportedly, an ET said, look, Earth is the darkest place in the universe. And you guys need to understand that. And that's why supposedly there's a lot of benevolent people in motherships, hanging out, rooting for us. 12-strand DNA experiment, 22 different sets of DNA from star beings and star nations. That's probably who we are. Darwinism, that's stupid. Evolution, apes, that's stupid. That's been
there was quite a jump in a very. I never believed. I mean, I believe in evolution, but some of the things we're told about the the origin of our species. It just
the missing link. There's just
too fast. It just happened too fast. We went from nothing to this. Yeah.
Proto-humans, Neanderthals, and Australopithecus, they're not humans. They don't pack the gear for speech. They don't have higher consciousness capabilities. And everyone's like, well, we'll find that missing link. Well, they'll still keep digging in Ethiopia, finding proto-humans.
Well, in their defense, they found some of them, but they haven't found enough.
Like, no. Yeah. We have some chimp DNA, Neanderthal DNA, which has chimp DNA in it. Lloyd Pye drilled this out, Dr. Lloyd Pye. And Pye is his name. He's dead now, but he said, there's no way we evolved from apes. It's impossible.
I followed him a lot. I liked him.
He was a brilliant guy. And it's
there's confusion because Lord Ludicrous Platt is asking, has John ever met Chris? And Chris Mellon is your cousin.
Many times.
Sure.
Yeah, many times.
Just to clear up the confusion.
We went to camp together when we were young kids.
Wow. I would like to see that. You two future Illuminati members.
We were both wimpy kids. I mean,
and Properly Paranoid asks, and this is right on topic, if Lou is pushing disclosure as a patriotic duty and is now being labeled as a whistleblower, how can he still be employed for the U.S. government? Because, he said he's a contractor for the U.S. government right now. That doesn't make sense either, right? If he's spilling the beans on UFOs, they wouldn't hire him, right?
Well, remember what my O&I friends told me. Steer clear and don't believe a word in his mouth. He's probably paid by 10 different agencies. His paychecks come in the mail, from 10 different places.
Wow.
I think him and Chris really do. There's a component of them that think they're doing the patriotic best.
The right thing.
Got to take one for the team. Because I told Chris in a letter, I said, listen, man, I'm your cousin. I fucking love you, man, but you're going to be the fall guys in this. They really are.
They need to throw somebody under the bus. Those two are.
They'll throw me under there. They'll lump me up with the Illuminati Mellons, But I'll be a loser too. But it's like, man, you're going to be the fall guys. Why?
Yeah, and thank you, Properly Paranoid.
They believe the thin file they got on the UFO subject. They believe it wholeheartedly. And
so you think they only got a small portion, right? And thank you, Lord Ludicrous Platt and Properly Paranoid.
They got 100.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I'm like, who would volunteer for this job where it's obviously going to fall apart within 10 years? The Great Awakening is happening. It's a fact. I mean, I've seen it over the past 40 years. People are much more interested in Earth history and megaliths and UFOs and the universe and the cosmos and consciousness.
I think I've seen a switch too, from what I remember from when I was very younger. Nobody talked about this.
No one.
There'd be like one television show a year about anything strange.
I was a UFO kid at high school, and so was Chris. Chris Mellon had a UFO club in high school and college.
I did not know that. So he's had a lifelong interest. And Al Warrior asks,
I think there's part of him that's really earnest about this, but he does not see the corruption.
Al Warrior's asking about.
He doesn't see the vastness of the corruption. He knows there's a little, old boy.
Some problems, but he doesn't see the full picture.
National security,
Al Warrior, the kind $5. He's asking, can this be related to 411 missing? Are you familiar with that sort of conspiracy? The 411 missing people for their own agenda. A lot of people go missing if they're doing something people don't like, right? But 411 missing is all in the national parks. It's a strange conspiracy.
Well, there is a story that high value targets like scientists and engineers are abducted for the secret space program or the deep state, USAP, unacknowledged special access programs from national parks. That's the story. It does make sense. It's a great place to kidnap someone.
Yeah, if they're hiking out in the woods,
lost in the national park, or they, if you want to get rid of somebody, a plane crash, or a fake heart attack. That's easy stuff to do.
You know what I just saw that I thought was terrifying?
Stephen and I die in car crashes or heart attacks. Who got it.
You know what I just saw that I thought was terrifying? That the CIA developed a heart attack gun.
Oh, that's the least of their toys. I mean, they've got, they can kill you with a satellite in a millisecond.
But that's crazy. They went to the trouble of developing a heart attack gun that shoots a dart that injects a chemical, and then the dart dissolves so that there be no, and it just gives people a heart attack.
Right.
And it looks to a medical examiner. It looks to a medical examiner like this is just a routine heart attack, and most people, they wouldn't do an autopsy even. They just go, oh, it's a heart attack.
That's just James Bond spy stuff, like the Russians with the little tablet of beryllium.
Yeah, but it's terrifying that our government is doing that, because we don't know they're not using it on American citizens or whatever.
Man, they do whatever they want. Everyone in the deep state does whatever the fuck they want. And honestly, there's not much we can do about it except talk about it and spread awareness of possibilities and theories. There's no conspiracy theories, there's conspiracy information. What people do with that information is up to them. Everyone's going to say, oh, Warren's a liar, an asshole. Okay. But I'm just telling you my opinions. You can formula. I want people to think for themselves, stand in their own power, and, be empowered. Don't bow down to any government or God or whatever. The gods were just ETs. I don't know.
A lot of people believe that.
Probably a god or source.
I've gone back and forth, because at first I went, no, Sitchin was wrong about so many of his translations, but then when you see the real translations, even, it's still compelling evidence.
Yeah,
Lord Ludicrous Plaid wants to know, and this is a great.
He got a lot of stuff wrong, but he got a lot of stuff right too.
Yeah. I have to go back over that whole rabbit hole, due to recent things that I've been reading. But Lord Ludicrous Plaid has a good point here. Where does there seem to be a change from craft to orbs and the skinwalker dino beavers, which I thought was ridiculous? Is it to keep the eyes, and this is my theory, that a lot of UFO stuff is to keep the eyes off of drones, black projects, and military technology? And he says, great show. What do you think of that? Do you think that there's a concerted disinformation campaign where UFOs are used as cover for black projects? Because I really believe that.
The whistleblower, Richard Doty, he was a counterintelligence expert. He says that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't know much about Skinwalker Ranch, only that the American West, according to the Native Americans, is very leaky. There's a lot of natural portals to other dimensions, and they talk about this in their
music said that,
oral history, and so that makes sense. Skinwalker Ranch is probably some deep state enclave where ETs appear. They're like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, soldiers and searchlights, and get called away, and they're like, well, crazy. Hey, I'm just here to pick up mangoes. That's the only. We're here to pick up the mangoes and watermelons. You picked the wrong spot, ET. And they arrest them. I don't know. There's a lot of wacky stuff out west, but the story of the Dulce base and all the gray hybrid human experiments and the horrors of women and children in cages. That's on an Apache Indian reservation.
Yeah, and I went there.
And they'll tell you about all the black.
I went there looking for everything, and I even paid. I paid a Native American.
A lot of military presence on their reservation because
I paid people out of it. I paid to get access to that. It's on a Native American reservation. You're not even allowed to walk on there without permission. So I sort of paid a Native American off to be a guide, and we didn't see anything. But to my, I don't know. I thought that was all disinformation. I didn't see any signs of like vents or a base, and was all over it. But then I thought, well, they could have moved it after word got out, or I don't know. But I wanted to, get back to. We got to end this soon, because I don't want to keep you. Though I appreciate your time immensely, and I'm so sorry for our screw up earlier. But listen, your father's. I did a lot of research on him, because I started listening to your interviews, and I was fascinated by your family history. So I did a lot of research on your father, and I wanted to know, because you've mentioned that at various times you went to your father and you were asking him about UFOs, and he had this sort of strange attitude towards you about it. So I wanted to know, what do you think that your father knew about UFOs, aliens, and the government secrets? And because you've come to him at various times, and sometimes he was very cagey about it, telling you it was nonsense and you're wasting your time, right? And then other times he sort of let a little bit loose, right? What do you think he knew? And what did he tell you later in his life? Or did he tell you anything?
It's a long story, but I do tell the story in my other interviews, like on Dark Journalist and with Regina Meredith. So I'll do the quick version. When he was Secretary of the Navy and I was a kid, I read his top secret briefings. I was a
off his desk.
Bastard.
Top secret. And, what's this, Dad? I'm gonna read this.
Like, yeah, my best friend and I were like, ooh, project, Operation, Deep Freeze. And he was really angry when he found out. He never locked his safe. Or maybe I knew the combo. I can't remember. I was like 12. But when I was 14, I said to him, one night he had a few drinks. And I said, oh, hit him up. And I said,
get him when he's drunk.
Yeah.
Be more honest.
Come on, Dad. Operation Deep Freeze. Why the hell are we in Antarctica? Why is the Navy down there? And he said, well, the Russians have missile silos and sub bases, and we have to have ours to counter that. And I said, well, there's got to be more than that. Why all the way down there? And he said, well, and he pointed up to the night sky at all the stars, and he said, space operations. Now, I didn't think much about that until I read Nick Cook's book on the Germans in Antarctica. And apparently there's an electromagnetic hole that makes it easy to go in and out from space. But in 1993, I'd always talked to him about UFOs, and he didn't want to talk about it. And in the 80s, not many people did. But in 1993, a racing buddy sent me the MJ12 files. And I showed him to Dad. I printed them out. And I said, I don't know the validity of these. They come from a guy I know. His father's in the aerospace business. What the hell is this? And he said, let me borrow these. Let me read them. And I was like, oh, that's strange. And what about write them right now? And he's like, no, I don't have time.
Maybe he recognized the moniker Majestic right away.
Oh, yes, he did. We went back and forth for months. Every couple of weeks, I was like, what about those files? Oh, I'll get back to you. What about those files? Oh, I don't have time. And finally, I cornered him. I said, enough. This is 1993. This is early on for me. And I was a very naive 31. I really was. Race cars, beer, women. I was just a fucking idiot.
Yeah, you got like unlimited money, so I don't blame you. I'd be partying it up, right?
Well, not unlimited, but
race cars and women sounds fun to me.
I did party it up. But we were young people. That's what you do. But I did this one thing, and I said, God damn it, tell me the fucking truth on this. This is the truth, isn't it? And he said, no, now listen, the Pentagon told me it was a hoax, and the FBI said this. I said, what do you think? And he said, well, I said, I've read this book on Roswell. I've read this book, the Project Blue Book. I've been after UFOs all my life. You know that. I know about this subject somewhat. Not as good as other people, but I knew some stuff. And finally, he's like, look, don't go down that road. You're not going to find what you want. That is national security stuff. They've got it all wrapped up. You won't find anyone to talk with you about it, which is not true. I talked to Bobby Raymond about it in his office, the Admiral. But he said he was just trying to protect me. And I know that now. But I was like, God damn it. He's like, just leave this alone and live your life and go race, have fun. I said, how the fuck am I going to have any fun or do anything in life now that I know this is the truth of the world? And you
didn't deny that it was
back
truth.
Engineering shit.
That's what I thought.
And maybe
I thought it was interesting is he didn't deny that you knew the truth. He just told you to stay away from it. You're not going to find it.
I mean, Greer told me he was a MAGIC member, which is Majority for Joint Intelligence Committee, which was not anymore. They changed the names and they changed all these committees and acronyms, but it was a liaison. He was on the Senate Select Intel, and he was chairman of the Armed Services Committee. And so he was read in on his slice of the UFO file. But what my dad did was kind of smart. Throughout my travels with him all over the world, in Russia, and naval bases and military people, Buckingham Palace, he showed me the deep state firsthand, but didn't call it that or didn't say that. I have stories that I'll relate, on the Farnborough Air Show where we had to go meet, some royal duke. And he was an asshole. And I said, what does this have to do with Air Force procurement? And he said, it's all wrapped up together. We have to deal with these people. Now, it's complicated, but he basically, he couldn't tell me anything. But what he did was smart. He took me with him everywhere.
Yeah. Did you meet the Queen of England too?
Oh, many times. My grandfather was good friends with her, and Andrew Mellon was good friends with the royal family. He was ambassador to England.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So that's a whole nother story, and that gets into the occult side. But my dad, what he did was he showed me. And a lot of times I was like, well, this is cool, a naval base. And, we'd be on some carrier and there'd be some lights on the horizon and all the crews going, ooh, what's that? And so I would see UFOs, but they wouldn't call them that. And so what he did was he took me and showed me the world firsthand. And then we would go to third world countries and see, dead bodies and war zones and things like that, really disgusting things, because he wanted me to grow the fuck up. And wow. He knew I was going to do something like this someday. And before he died, he urged me to come forward. I never would have without him.
Wow, that's interesting. And you know what is another little known fact about your father is that he was at one time married to Elizabeth Taylor.
And she believed in UFOs.
What was she like with
she
cool. Talked to you about UFOs, right?
We did. She saw one off the coast of California with Eddie Fisher. And it did the zigzag impossibility maneuvers, G-force. And, because it had a time-space bubble around it. And so she knew that truth. And they tried, she and Eddie Fisher and maybe some of her other husbands, they tried to get some information and they were just like, fuck off movie stars. Now, of course, today they use movie stars as mouthpieces for disinformation. But
we got Demi Lovato's a UFO expert all of a sudden. And now
and Marilyn Monroe definitely mind controlled and CIA and K-Ultra stuff. But she believed in all that, and she was very cool and down to earth. So, but the thing is with my dad is, I came to realize that even though, 9/11 came around and I grilled him on the Pentagon whole, and I said, this was a Tomahawk, wasn't it? There's no plane debris, no wings, no
nothing at the Pentagon.
He said, I will not talk about this with you. And by dint of him refusing to talk about something, he's telling me in a roundabout way, yes, it was a Tomahawk. Now go piece it together on your own. And even though he can't say that verbally, by his actions, he made me do that. And so I would get even more curious and I was hooked after 9/11, like a lot of people. I knew the deep state was really real. And I was there the day before and the day after. I lost a friend in the towers. And it's a miracle. I was at the hotel across the street. I would have been killed. But it's weird, and I'm down there the day after in the ground zero with a shovel with my friend, and there was nothing to do. And so I knew that's when I really got shiver went down the spine, and I knew, holy shit, I bet the UFOs are connected, and it all was. But he couldn't talk about a lot of stuff, but by his actions and what he would do with me, he showed it to me. In other words, you can talk to somebody about UFOs, but if you take them to Area 51 and take them into a hangar and show them something without saying a word, you could say, well, I didn't say anything.
Yeah, you could pass a polygraph. I never said anything to you about this.
Somebody. And but in the Majestic 12 files, he was like, yeah, they're real. But
that's amazing.
But leave it alone.
Such an amazing. Your father was such an amazing guy. I was fascinated reading.
Well, he did his part to keep the secrecy going and the status quo going. I'm not happy about that. But he's a naive guy too. I mean, he's nowhere near as knowledgeable as I am on anything. But he was a smart politician, and he was smart. He wanted me. He said, "Do you want to come on this trip? It's going to be. You need a security clearance with the CIA. We're going to meet Gorbachev. You're going to get grilled and blah blah blah." So I have a CIA file. They knew when my wife was going to date me when we first met. She had to submit me, and I said, "Oh, don't worry." I already have a file from going to Russia with it.
They can just add to it, right? Is that true? Well, if you're in the CIA and you're a woman and you start dating a guy, you have to.
I thought it was great. Yeah, she was
checked out.
Brilliant linguist. She's was head of the Spanish division. But the thing is, my dad took me and showed me the world, a slice of the world most people don't get to see.
Yeah, like I said, you got your family has been at the crossroads of history. You met Gorbachev, the Queen of England.
Yeah, he would say, "Look," he'd say, "Look, you need to pay attention when we go in to meet Gorbachev. You need to listen and shut your mouth and listen to what's being said, because you need to start reading between the lines." And I did. I didn't listen, everything. And I didn't know Russian, but I knew Russian history from my college years. That was my major. And so he said, always listen, you need to listen carefully, because what these people say, especially when they're drunk, is very telling.
And get a few martinis in it.
You'll get a picture of how the world works. And so, all these stories I have, and being with him and travels all over the world, he was showing me how the world works, and not just the posh dinner parties and champagne stuff. He showed me the dirty side of things. He says, let's go to the bad neighborhood of this city. And we'd go and we'd see the shanty towns and people in a ditch dying. Or, I saw that in Egypt and Indonesia when I was a teenager. I didn't shy away from that. I wanted to know everything about the world, especially all the hard stuff. And I've never been on a battlefront, but I've been near ones, and just the devastation. And that's why I'm trying to work with veterans. I'm trying to do my part to give back to those.
Yeah, thank you for that, because my father was a veteran, and he
I
would appreciate
that's
somebody
my
doing
duty.
Stuff like that.
That's my duty, and they're very nice.
Well, I've kept you here for a very long time, but I thought that the best way to end this, because I see you as this sort of, like you said earlier, like this sponge, and you're taking in all of this conspiracy land stuff. So I'd like to ask for your prediction of what's coming in the world of conspiracies and UFOs in 2022. What do you see happening in the next year with UFOs, with maybe some revelations about the deep state and our world? Because it seems like before it used to be, remember before when everything, these crazy conspiracy theorists, but now it seems like there's a 60-day window between a conspiracy and it's a reality now, right? Like we find these things out, like, we're not crazy. This really did happen.
Well, thank Chris and Lou and the DIA and the CIA, because we were all everyone in the disclosure movement was vindicated in 2017. I had good friends from college come up and say, "Hey, you're not an idiot. After all, you were right about UFOs."
Yeah, the government said they're real.
Thanks.
Right?
Jerk off. But at least they did that. They brought a dead topic alive. I give them credit for that. And they still are keeping it alive. So I give them credit for this. But come on. I think we're going to get more of the same in 2022. I don't predict things all that well. I give you some opinions. I think they're going to double down on the UAP office. Now there's going to be a UAP in every garage. CNN's going to pump that with, testing.
Well, yeah. David Wilcock's going to be selling hover cars.
My gut feeling, which I urge everyone to respect, that's your higher self, your gut feeling, sixth sense. It's telling me that by 2030 we're going to have some really solid disclosure, but I don't think it's going to make a lot of people happy. I think disclosure is a very sad and grim reality. Yes, there's some beautiful things about it. Obviously the universe is mostly benevolent. I think that's wonderful. I think what people are doing with mass meditations and if they want to go on a CE5 or something, I'd advise caution. You might summon a baddie, but these are all positive things to do, because really, disclosure is going to have to come from us.
I believe that.
And
it's not coming from the CIA people.
And this gets back to my wacky theory that maybe they're doing a lot of this stupid thing, UAP office stuff, to poke the disclosure movement with sharpened sticks and get us to, I don't know, argue or whatever, but at least do more, because they can't talk about it. The deep state is full of factions by all accounts, and none of them get along. And so a lot of these people have scalar weapons that theoretically could take a chunk of the earth, away, which would kill everything on the surface. Forget nukes. I think it's most likely that Simon Parkes and other people are correct that ETs have been disabling nukes since the early 90s. Because come on,
that's terrifying.
Some country would have lobbed off a nuke by now. Sure, a few little tactical nukes. I think they were using them in Yemen. If you look up videos of Yemen and, we got an ammunition bunker. Look how giant the explosion. I'm like, shit. Okay, maybe that was an ammunition bunker. Maybe it wasn't. And somebody was using a tac nuke. apparently the attack nukes that the U.S. military has, the radiation signature dissolves in 24 hours. That's what I've heard. So take it for what you want. I mean, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I've recently found out through researching some stuff about nuclear weapons that there's nuclear weapons that don't irradiate. They simply explode an area. So the radiation for some of these weapons is purposeful. They don't have to irradiate the whole area if they don't want to. Some of the weapons are just
in the last 20 years of development.
They're just concussive, huge bombs that will, destroy a whole city, but not leave it irradiated. It depends
right, and
on
they'll always say, and it's possible they'll say that's just a fuel air, thermobaric weapon, which is also devastating, like a tactical.
Yeah.
So you can use either or, depending on the application. Maybe underground you can't use a thermobaric. Obviously, there's not enough air. So maybe a tech nuke for underground facilities is the way to go for black ops, special forces. If we got it, we're going to use it. If we got a weapon, we're going to use it. That's the American way.
We're great at dropping bombs on people, especially brown people. We like to do that.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, I used to cry on the. My sisters and I would cry when we'd see the big bombers, the B-52s, just leveling villages on TV. I think that's why I never went in the military, even though I'm very fond of the U.S. military and its people.
And don't you think
you like policies or the deep state, but the people in it and who are doing a hard job on submarines and shit.
I respect that, but don't you think if you wanted
I never went in it because I got this. I think my generation who saw Vietnam, we got a bad taste for it. I mean, I burned my it wasn't a draft card, but it was selective service. I burned that in high school with all my friends. Everyone's like, why didn't you go in the Marines or Navies like your dad said? And I said, because the stain of Vietnam, that horror from my 80s generation. I graduated high school in 81, college in 86. We were not. I had 2 friends go in the military of a class of 100, 72, high school. And that was it.
Well, and with your family connections, you could have went anywhere you want. You could have went to Annapolis.
I would have gone to the Navy.
Or anywhere,
I think I went to the Marines. I really thought about it, but then I was, hooked on the racing thing, and I was young and I was arrogant, and I just said, "Nah, I'm going to be a racing driver," and that might have been my higher self going, "Don't go in the military because." Now this is a story I've heard, and I can't confirm any of it, but once you sign on the dotted line, I don't care if you're a private first class or a 4-star general. You sign that military document, you're basically under national security protocols. And if you dig deep enough, if they don't like what you're doing or what you're talking about, they do have a legal right to terminate you.
Wow, that's crazy.
I can't confirm that, but it does make sense to me because my O&I buddy, when I was telling him about some of this, he said, I can't believe anyone in the military would go against the Constitution, anybody in uniform. And I said to my friend, listen, the people in the deep state I'm talking about in black programs, they changed uniforms 5 times a day. And he said, I know what you're talking about. And so, probably this is why I know a lot about the military. I'm passionate about the history of it, but
you didn't want to be a part of it.
I think subconsciously, or maybe my higher self was looking out for me and just said, be a racing driver, you schmuck, and don't do that. And I never did. And I didn't sign any of those contracts. I'm not sure if that's true, but I would think for certain officers, maybe above a certain rank, that might be true. Because if you're a Navy, lieutenant or a lieutenant commander or whatever, and you're on a submarine and you're dealing with classified stuff and you get drunk at a bar and you talk about it, they might throw you in Leavenworth for life. But if you really
heard that,
yeah, you notice how most or all whistleblowers, they're all enlisted personnel. Robert Dean, all these people, they were all enlisted. I can't think of one officer or, God forbid, a general or admiral who has come forward. Not a one. And maybe it's because of that, clause.
Yeah, it could be. I've never heard of that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Do you know of any whistleblowers, any in the UFO field there were former officers?
No, not really.
I think there might have been one. But
Colonel Corso count? Was he an enlisted officer? But I don't find him very credible. But
He might have been. Very, very few. It's mostly enlisted personnel. And I wonder it's because, well, you're an officer, you have to sign 10 contracts. So that's just a tidbit. I come up on my own. I don't know if it's true or not, but it does make some sense.
Well, that's a somber thought to know that they could.
It is.
That.
I mean,
it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, they kill people to keep secrets. They're going to do anything to keep certain secrets. You know,
everyone's like, "Oh, I don't believe in that." It's like, God, this is a dirty world, people. I mean, I've seen it. It's grim. I mean, we get violent movies. We're very desensitized to violence. You know, games, movies, TV shows. It's all aliens and violence and monsters. You know, we're very desensitized to it. You know, in 15 years, if they disclose all these horrors, you know, there's a good chance a lot of the Americans, at least, because we've been programmed the most, I think, will be like, I knew it. You know, and that's it.
Yeah, could be.
Because there's been, you know, Tom Cruise killing the monsters and you know, all these sci-fi movies. It's all violent. Alien movies. Those are horror movies. They're very good, but they're horror movies, the Alien franchise. You know, Star Trek's not too bad, but it is violent. Star Wars.
It's war, yeah.
Darth Vader and his minions. Yeah. The Alliance. I mean, come on, people. What are they trying to tell us?
Well, it was interesting that the reboot of Star Wars, the last three, they really, really did use a lot of Nazi sort of imagery.
Well, they always have. But I mean, you know, if there are Germans,
they're the bad guys. Make them look like Nazis, you know?
Yeah, they're not trying to hide any of this. Everyone's like, I don't believe the Germans in space. That's all nonsense. You know, look at the movies. I mean, yes, Iron Sky, the franchise, parodies it. But come on,
kind of funny, but it's fun.
My nephew and my grandson, they're like, Star Wars. And I'm like, my God, it's just, you know, the few rebels fighting all these fascists, you know, and they're hired mercenaries. You know, ET mercenaries. You know,
some of them were,
it's brutal slavery. They talk about slavery. Remember, was Anakin's mother, and they were slaves. They
were slaves, and then Anakin killed all the sand people. He killed the whole village.
He killed all the sand people. Genocide. They touch upon, I think, some of the realities of our world and our solar system and beyond. I think they're trying to really tell us something with all these movies.
As long as you don't tell us that it's basically a true story, like David Wilcock.
George Lucas got the idea of Star Wars, I believe, from Robert Morningsky's grandfather, who wrote it down. It was an oral history, his Native American tribe, about this, you know, planet killer and all these, you know, mean people.
Yeah, I've heard something about that once.
And before. George Lucas took it and gave him no credit. So George Lucas can kiss my fat ass. You know, he's and Spielberg too. You know, he and Reagan in the White House with Close Encounters, and
E.T.
Oh, how you love your docudrama. You know, I mean, it was all, they were showing us the truth. It's so obvious. People are still debating, oh, I don't buy it. Really? What do you buy? You know, I mean, it's incredible. It's all in our faces, and people are, oh, I don't buy it. Like the entire Hollywood is geared towards war and sci-fi and violence.
Sure, yeah.
It's, you know, this stuff is, you know, we're not all crazy making this stuff up. It's in our faces. It's incredibly obvious. Everyone in Hollywood and the CIA, they're like, God, they're finally getting it. Those idiots. We've been trying to tell them for 50 years.
Yeah, well, a lot of people think that some of this Hollywood stuff is designed to acclimate us to the idea.
Right. The first movie, the story goes, the first movie that the CIA and the U.S. military cobbled together was in 1950, the day the Earth stood still.
Yeah, and that was a movie about aliens coming to visit.
And the aliens, the ET says, you've got to get your shit together and clean the environment and stop doing all this nuclear stuff. And that's been the ET, you know, that's an obvious good narrative. And after that, it just sort of went downhill. And monster movies in the 50s, Flying Saucer Mania.
I love those old 50s sci-fi movies, though.
Yeah,
it's like a guilty pleasure.
I love Forbidden Planet. I love that. And that's also the military, you know, all male military saucer lands, and they're like, well, we'll blow it all up. They blow it all up. But in reality, they wouldn't. They would have had more saucers and more military men come in and capture all that underground technology on the planet. That would have been the real story. Instead, oh well, we better blow it up. No, they would have co-opted that technology. Toot sweet, and that's what we do now. I mean, a crash landed UFO. Apparently, we have so many crashed UFOs and trade goods. UFO spare parts and medbed components or whatever, and we turn it away because it's like, oh, we've got warehouses full of that. Come back, Darth Vader or Mr. Klingon, come back next month with something good. We already have that.
Yeah,
surplus of technology.
Yeah, well, you got to come back. You have to come back sometime, and we'll just talk about UFO crash retrievals, because I got a huge file of stuff, and we could go through my files, compare your files. I got to tell you that everybody in the live chat is.
I don't have any files.
Oh well, I think you have an encyclopedia. Do you have somewhat?
I have notes. My notes are on my.
No, but you have somewhat of a photographic memory or something, because you.
I do. I do.
Yeah.
But all my notes are on my website in PDF format. Go to John W. Warner IV, author, and go to research, and all my notes are there. I'm working on 2021. I'm finishing up 2021 now, and I'll post it. It's just random notes. They're not my opinions on anything, really.
Yeah, I will share that. I will put. I'm a band show host. I will share you have a website, and I have it here. And I want people to make sure.
I'm an open book. I'm an open book. I share.
Yeah, what's funny is I started seeing you on all of these shows and listening to your interviews and finding you fascinating. And then I followed you on Twitter, and I think I tweeted at you or sent you a message, and I was like shocked. I'm like, wow, this guy said something back to me. That's amazing. But you're not like some rich prick that doesn't, elitist.
I'm a prick, man. I'm a rich prick.
Well, I know, but you talk to everybody, and you're
I enjoy everyone's opinion. My dad was like that. Liz Taylor was like that. They were people persons, and so they I got my love of people. A lot of my friends are blue collar and middle class. A lot of old car nuts. But rich people don't have time. They don't have time. All my rich friends, they don't have time for me. Or my wife. They don't.
They're lost. They're lost. I don't want to talk about UFOs for 5 hours.
I love them. They're nice people. I find people that aren't mega rich. I find them just as or more interesting, because they don't put on airs. They're like, oh, well, I've got to go, to Paris and to pick up my hamburger. They don't do that. And but you can sit down with these veterans or people that I meet and I know all the time, and they're very interesting people. And I've always been that way. Growing up, I didn't have just rich friends. I grew up in DC. Half my friends were black, and they were they weren't wealthy, or I had a few wealthy friends, but most of my friends were just middle class, upper middle class, or lower class. I mean, I don't know. I grew up poor, and we hated all those. We thought people that live in the suburbs were rich. We thought those kids were rich. They got a pool. What, are you kidding me? They got their own pool in their backyard. These rich pricks. We hated them. And I was in wrestling, and we used to love going to the rich neighborhoods because we couldn't believe the size of their stadium kind of places and the resources they had. But the funny thing is, now my kids are suburban kids in a very, I would say, wealthy, affluent area. And so, I want to drive him back to the hood someday and say, this is where Daddy grew up. Well, that's part of the control system of Earth. You've got religions, you've got wars, militaries, police, governments. You also have racism and the caste system to keep people fighting and angry at one another. If we all got together, if you picked a random 500 people, all
divide and conquer,
and put us in a big room, after a week, most of us would be good friends, because it's like, wow, I didn't realize, you poor people, I don't hate you, and you rich pricks aren't all that much pricky, something.
Yeah, I told you I had my revelation. I was very fortunate in that I had a very great, wealthy person mentor me. That changed my life, because he didn't have to take the time to mentor me about business and how to be successful, how to get things done. Yeah, he really helped me. So after that, I got to give everybody a chance. Pix has a very important question that he really wants you to answer, and I think I understand it. He says, what one thing should we all know, or do you want to share, John? Is there something important that you want us all to know or that you want to share?
That despite our caste systems and racial tensions, we're all equals. In fact, it's said we're all equals in the cosmos, everyone. It's just the illusion of separation and that one person or one race is better than the other, our overlords. That's all an illusion. I've seen this, different groups of people from all classes and races come together at events and functions. And, I've had people say, wow, those guys weren't the assholes I was thinking. It's all gerrymandered and constructed, race wars, inequality, all that. It's all, from above. The whole control system of the world is like that. They foment that. Isn't it convenient that a cop killed another person in Chicago whenever they want to rile people up and distract them from something?
Yeah,
I hated to see George Floyd die. I think that cop was a psychopath. But how easy is it to, most cops are good people, and the 20% a little shady. But somebody who needs money, pay him $100,000, your family's set for life or whatever. You go to prison for killing somebody we want dead, and look what happens: race riots and burnings and all these things. That's a very easy way to foment dissent, to distract people from this, that, or the other that they don't want you to focus on. I wish everyone understood that, how easy it is to do that. It's it's so sad.
I am a terrible show host. So right now I'm putting the link to your website and the link to buy your book in the description of this video. So if you're interested in John and want to get his book or visit his website, the links will be in the description to be able to do that.
Yeah, Lion Tiger Bear is a good read. The first book, Little Anton, is too long for most people, but the second book is exciting and fast paced. So
I don't think it was too long. I think it's
some people do, but most do. You could skim through it and then just go to book 3 of Little Anton. But Lion Tiger Bear, I wrote that. My wife read it in 2 days.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it took her 6 months to read the first one.
So, that has to be terrible for her, right? My wife's the same way. Like, I write music, and sometimes I say, "Here, listen to these songs," and she doesn't, or she doesn't have time, or my wife, the same thing. Read this book, and your wife's like, "Oh no, I gotta read this whole thing." Right? She
sneaks onto my laptop to read chapters because I
there you go
to read. So she's very sneaky that way. No, she got very interested by the time I finished the first one, and now she wants to read everything I write, but I don't want to ruin the story for her.
No, that reminds me of a really funny joke, John. I have a friend whose wife snoops in all of his computers, right? She snoops. She wants to know what he's looking up, what he's doing, who he's talking to. So you know what he did? No, this is great. He started searching how to tell your wife that her vagina smells. That's awesome. So she goes to his laptop.
I knew you would end on something raunchy.
Something raunchy. Yeah, we have to keep the shock value here. Thank you, Jesse Singer, for your kindness, your generosity, and support, and thank all of you. And we have Pix with a kind and generous $5 super chat, and Al Warrior with a kind and generous $5. Space Exposure, great show, Stephen. Mr. Warner is very informed and interesting guest. I can't disagree with you. Thank you all for your kindness, your generosity, and support, and especially thanks to our guest tonight, which I hope you're going to come back, because I'll tell you right now, people are going to bug me to bring you back because everybody's still got 100 more questions, right?
I might have to start drinking heavily again or something.
I don't blame you, but I'm gonna thank you for your time and your interest in these subjects, because I love somebody like you with all of your military connections and family background and all the people looking into this thing, and I hope you'll keep looking into it, and I hope you'll come back soon.
All right, man.
All right, you have a good night. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Warner. It was a pleasure. Thank you. All right, boy, what an amazing look. My lights timed out. That's how long we were here. And I apologize to Mr. Warner. I didn't realize that we had gone so far over time. We went way into overtime tonight, but that's okay. He survived, and I'm sure that I will as well. So what can I say, friends? Kate, I'm going to take a few more comments and questions. We're coming up on 3 hours almost here. Kate Schneider says, great interview, interesting stuff. I agree. Paul Cargo says, nice job, Stephen. Oh, and I just want to mention, for the benefit of anybody just joining us or who only saw the interview, I was supposed to do I was supposed to come on and tell you all about his family's history, his father. He's got an amazing father, amazing history of his family. And I did that on the part one, because what happened, for those that don't know, is that I screwed up, and it's totally my fault. I scheduled this interview through email. And so John was looking, but I had previously spoken to John through Twitter DMs. So when it came time to do the interview, I just sent him everything through Twitter. And he didn't look at Twitter, and I didn't look at my email because I was trying to communicate with him through Twitter. Anyway, totally my fault. He didn't show up at the time. Well, it's not that he didn't show up. He didn't get the link to join the interview at 7 p.m. earlier Eastern time tonight. So what I did is start telling the whole story of his background and his interest in Nazi UFOs and all these strange esoteric conspiracy land topics and all that stuff. And then I gave some information about his current book and a lot of historical information about his father, because I just find him and his family to be fascinating. Like I said, I'm a student of history. I'm a big fan of history. And John and his family have been at the crossroads of so many amazing historical stuff. His father worked for Richard Nixon. His grandfather knew General Patton and was heavily involved in World War II and all of these things. And Project Paperclip, his grandfather was involved in. His father was also a senator and had some involvement with Roe versus Wade. And there's all of these weird historical crossroads and major parts of history, right? And his family was involved in all of this stuff. So to me, it's just fascinating to read about this stuff. And every time I think, wow, he's got an interesting family, then I find out something else about his family that's crazy and interesting. Like his father was at one time married to Elizabeth Taylor. And that's amazing. So really interesting guy. Now, I get that there were some people in the chat that were like, oh, blah, blah, blah. We talked in rapid fire succession about 100 different things tonight. And do I agree with everything that John believes? No. But I believe that we can be respectful towards each other. And I can respect his beliefs and not, I try to jump in and say, I don't think that's credible and here's why. But, after a while, you kind of go, I'm not going to keep saying that or repeating myself. There are some things that he believes that I don't believe. I don't think some of the stuff, pans out. But I agree with him. His sort of methodology is to listen to everyone, to take it all in, and then make his own determinations about what the bigger picture is. And I think there's probably some value in that. And I got to tell you, I have sort of stalked him. I'll be honest with you. I listened to every interview that I could hear him do. First came on my radar with the Stephen Greer film. And even though I'm not a fan of Stephen Greer, somebody said I hate him. And I think hate is a very strong word. I would say that it is more accurate to say I dislike and distrust Stephen Greer. But I first found John through Stephen Greer's documentary. And I went, John Warner, why does that name sound familiar? Who is this guy? So I looked him up. And I got to say, even though I don't really care for Stephen Greer, I liked what he was talking about in that documentary. So I went and did my rabbit hole research. Who is this guy? And then, oh my gosh, look at who his dad was. Oh my gosh, he's Christopher Mellon's cousin, right? And it just all of these weird things. And I don't know. I found him fascinating. So I started listening to every interview that he's ever done that I could find on the internet. And like I said, I disagree with some of the things he believes. Two people, even if they're he and I are intensely interested in some of the same exact things, especially Nazi technology and hidden history and revisionist history, right? And conspiracies and all of these things. But we're not going to agree on everything. And some things that I'm sure that some things that I think are true and real and credible, he doesn't believe, and vice versa. Yeah, Pix, I didn't really give, and here we go. See, leave it to Pix. Says, you gave him a pass on good. John's approach to take it all in is exactly what I have been trying to share with you. No, Stephen, you hate Greer, own it. No, I dislike him. I try not to hate anybody, Pix, because hate requires energy. You know what I prefer to do? I prefer to either dislike, which requires just a little bit of energy. Like hate, you got to really put the energy into hate somebody. Like, I hate that motherfucker, you know? Dislike is like, I just don't like them, right? It doesn't require very much energy to not like somebody. Ideally, if I was a better person, Pix, I would say that the best thing for me to do, and somebody taught me this when I was very young, is don't hate somebody. Don't dislike them. Be apathetic, because apathy requires zero energy. You just don't care. But I do care. So I suppose I will use the word dislike, right? In the case of Greer. My point being, I'm sure there's things, and I don't know that I gave him a pass on good. My take, having heard all of his interviews, is that he doesn't believe good and thinks that good is way, that good is not credible. But John is very diplomatic. He doesn't except for Elizondo and Mellon, I haven't heard him say bad things about too many people. I even heard him, like I said, I heard him on an interview with that woman he mentioned, and she was talking about all her past lives and her superpowers. And she's on the same show as him. It was him and her and an interviewer. And this woman was saying all this wacky stuff. And John is just talking to her like, yeah, well, that's very interesting what you said about the secret, the reptilian aliens in space, because I've read this, or there's this from this book, and he starts rattling off all these books that mention reptilian. And I was kind of fascinated that this girl was saying all kinds of crazy woo, way out there on the wild side of conspiracy stuff. And she was saying this stuff with such nonchalance, like, when I met the reptilian overlord space commander and all, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing, but she said, and then she starts talking about her superpowers and how she's empathic and psychic and all of this stuff that to most people, even people that are into this stuff, would be like, well, she's a little too out. John was very nice to her. He was very, very kind to her. He didn't disparage her or her beliefs or her experience. I don't know. Something about that I found fascinating. Plan B says, I heard him on Dark Journalist. I haven't heard that interview yet. That one's on my list still. Yeah. Oh, Plan B says, he's a wild dude. And see, we admire honesty, especially respectful honesty. Plan B says, he's a wild dude. I thought he was full of shit at first, but who knows? He's got the deep connections. He sure does, right? And Pix, let it go. Pix is now saying, Steven, you hate Greer. No, I dislike him. How about this, Pix? Maybe I did hate him at one point, right? He made me angry because I felt like he was taking advantage of people and ripping people off for money that he didn't deserve. But I'm going to try to just dislike him, okay? Because hate requires too much energy, and I need my energy for other things. I really do. I really do need my energy for other things. And, yeah, I agree with Pix, who says, John speaks the truth he believes. Props for that. Yeah. Plan B says he trolls Lou and Chris, so I like him. That's kind of where I was with it, Plan B. That's kind of where I was. Not many people, especially bigger these sort of conspiracy land celebrities, are talking smack on Chris and Lou. So I find his honesty refreshing when it comes to that. And he's Chris Mellon's cousin. I think he might have some insight into Chris Mellon and his motivations and his connections and all of that stuff. Dorothy Hawkins says, I found Greer when the Disclosure came out. I found him before that. I watched him on Larry King before the Disclosure Project. He was around, just not quite as not quite at the front of the class of UFO conspiracy guys for a while. He was a lesser known UFO guy for quite a while before the Disclosure Project. The Disclosure Project really put him on the map as one of the leading UFO guys. Space exposure. The Disclosure Project changed my paradigm. Yeah. John says, Pick says, John is awesome. Love the guy. He misses a lot of stuff, but he nails a bunch too. Yeah. BS alert, buddy. That's like asking about Liana, the Star Traveler. Only Warner has been on a podcast with her. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't know I can't know. I'm sure I missed some of the interviews that he'd been on. And like I said, he's very open-minded guy, and he likes to hear the wild stories. He likes the wild side of conspiracy story, right? That's where we're at, right? Archaic Revival says, Truth Seeker, you're the Tomax to my Zaymon. And I actually know what that means. You're talking about G.I. Joe, the Cobra guys, Tomax and Zaymon. I have not heard of those guys for so long. Thank you for reminding me. That's a weird that is a weird part of my childhood. If people don't know, Tomax and Zaymon were G.I. Joe villains. They were part of Cobra. They were twins and very weird, right? Very weird guys. They were, this is Tomax and Zaymon, and one of them had a scar, right? That's how you could tell them apart. And they worked for Cobra, so they were G.I. Joe bad guys. Interesting thing. And I had this toy. I had these toys when I was a kid. I remember. Yeah, I had a whole lot of G.I. Joe toys when I was a kid. But you know what's interesting? What's really interesting, Archaic Revival, is I didn't like G.I. Joe very much. I liked Cobra, right? Because they had cooler tanks and cooler weapons, and they had masks and stuff. I liked Cobra, and I was always watching, kind of hoping for Cobra to win secretly. Honestly, I loved Destro and Cobra Commander with the hood. I had all that stuff. Has John been on an interview with Anjali yet? Not to my knowledge, but maybe we could try to make that happen, right? Pix, we have a new and improved Steven. Yeah, Pix, I'm a work in progress, right? I don't know about you, but I try to continually improve myself and try to make myself a better person. You know what I have been doing lately is I'm trying to spend more time talking to my son. For those that don't know, I have two sons, 5 and 10. And my 5-year-old, Xavier, is very curious and inquisitive and talkative. And as much as I love him, that can be annoying sometimes. You try to do something, you're like, shut up, Xavier, I'm busy, So anyway, work in progress. I'm trying to become a better father, so I'm spending more time just talking to him. And he talks to me about all kinds of nonsense, and I just, not nonsense, but you know what I mean. Like he talks to me about kids at school, and I don't know who he's even talking about and all these other things, but I'm trying to spend more time just talking to him and teaching him things too. So yeah, I'm a work in progress, Pix. I'm trying to improve myself, always trying to improve myself. Kate Schneider is here, who says, I love this community because it's harder to pass BS than ever before. Way too many serious researchers. And I'm glad to have Kate here in the live chat. For those who don't know, that's Dark Journalist Girlfriend. So we're honored by her presence, right? Maybe some of that dark journalist good mojo is going to rub off on me. We need all the help we can get. And I don't know that I disagree with you, Pix. Pix says, we all owe Greer a huge debt. Sorry, he pushed the reality we aren't alone forward massively. He also made millions doing it, Pix, but I'll give you that one. We do owe him for I think that his early work was much more credible and that his heart used to be more in the right place, but money gets in the way of ethics and morality quite often. So this is what it's happening. Paul Carga, this is true. I've read this. John Warner's dad is known to be the wealthiest U.S. senator. That's saying a lot. Yeah, there's some listen, it's the Warner Mellon fortune. We heard him say his grandfather was a physician, like a doctor, and his father was, working class, but educated, but working class, middle class. So his father sort of married up into the Mellon family, and the Mellon family they're the Mellon Bank. They have huge amounts of money. So his father sort of married up, and but he was also very, very successful in his own right. It's not like he just married a rich heiress and didn't work. He was very hardworking, very ambitious. I'm fascinated by his family, especially his father. What an amazing life. And the guy died at 94. God bless him, recently. So rest in peace, John William Warner III, John's father. Passed away, I believe, last year, May of last year. So at 94, God bless the guy. He had an amazing life. He was at the intersection of so many important parts of history and people in history. Amazing. BS Alert Bunny, why would, anybody, let alone Dorothy, even dip their toe in the deep woo when they don't believe any of this? Don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That girl Jessica says, seems like you're becoming a regular, Gandalf. Yeah, and welcome, Gandalf. It's good to see you here again. I'm glad to see so many people here. And I once again, I want to apologize for the screw up earlier. So if you want to hear more about John and his history and his dad's history, then look at the part 1, which was me filling time trying to get John to get to the interview, but it was my screw up. He emailed me for the link, and I didn't check my email. I'm messaging him on Twitter like a dummy, right? But I'm so glad that everything worked out. And from a content creator standpoint, hey, we milked John for 2 shows, 2 parts, right? That girl Jessica said she likes She-Ra. I grew up with He-Man, right? I'm trying to get my son to watch the new He-Man by Kevin Smith, and he's not interested. He watches like 10 minutes of it. He's like, it's not Pokemon. It's not, what I like. He's like, it's okay cartoon, but it's not great, Dad. And I'm like, damn it. I'm trying to get him to like He-Man so that when he's watching cartoons, I like it too, right? Because he watches crazy, stupid things, and I can't stand what he watches, right? Patrick Sheehan says, bringing on the Cobra knowledge, right? Yes, Plan B. Do you remember Zartan? Yes, I had a Zartan. And you're right. They used color-changing dye in the toy. And when you put the toy out in the sun, it turned blue or green. Well, it depends on, I guess, yeah. Zartan was a master of disguise, too, sort of like the Chameleon, the Spider-Man villain. He was one of my favorite Cobra guys. This is Zartan. Ooh. Oh, there's a Zartan shirt. That's not what we wanted. Oh, wait a minute. Do I get the right thing? Oh, yeah, I do have the right thing. Okay. Yeah, so this was the Zartan, and this was the Zartan figure. And if you put the Zartan figure out in if you put it out in the sun, Zartan would turn blue. And I think they used color-changing dye, I read somewhere. Boy, we're getting an education in Cobra at the end here, right? Yeah, interesting. Zartan is definitely interesting. I loved Cobra growing up. I used to even get some of the G.I. Joe toys and paint them black and just say, Cobra captured that tank, right? I got in trouble with my dad once because I got into his black spray paint. Kate Snyder, by the power of Grayskull, the transformation was the best. Yeah, it really was. And for those that are interested in He-Man, there is look up He-Man Masters of the Universe PC game. Somebody made a tribute game to He-Man that looks just like the old cartoon we all grew up with. It's amazing. Patrick Sheehan didn't like Cobra. Too fascist. They just wanted to take over the world. Come on. Conan the Barbarian. Yes, that was cool. Taneth of the Silver Legion. I don't know about that. Kate Schneider says, Pix, yeah, it's great. In the ufology community in general, so many people passionate about research, and it's not just buying into BS tales pushed. Yeah, that's kind of why I liked your boyfriend there, Kate Schneider, Dark Journalist. I like that one thing that impresses me is that he seems to speak very intelligently without notes. Like, I don't know if he memorizes stuff or what does he do, but he has very good grasp. I guess you always admire traits in other people that you lack. Like, I can't do that. I need notes and slides and, I can't just do it off he's amazing sometimes. I've been catching up watching him, really enjoying the couple latest Joseph P. Farrell interviews that he did. And I hope to continue catching up. Yes. Have we found a new Stanton Friedman? Who is a trustworthy UFO researcher these days? There's a few left. I like John Greenwald from the Black Vault. I like Alien Scientists and a few others. I mean, there's a few other people that are still good, right? Senator John Warner was one of the good ones when the GOP still had ethics, even in D.C. If you say so. And the live chat is blowing by me. One of the only downsides to the show getting bigger is I have a harder time in the live chat because sometimes it's just flying by and I'm trying to keep up. So please forgive me. And those listening in audio podcast land, please forgive me as well, because if there's dead air, it's because I'm coughing or sneezing or hacking. That's right, I'm sick again. I had a cold for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then I had 2 weeks where I felt great, and now I'm back to having a cold. I don't know if it's the same cold that came back or I got a new one, and also the last couple of days I've had a temperature and I'm feeling crappy, and I got a headache. And a few people have mentioned to me that these seem to be the Omicron symptoms. And so I'm just out of an abundance of caution. I'm going to be taking a COVID test tomorrow because I'm once again really under the weather and feeling sick, right? Yes, I would add Dark Journalist as a credible researcher in there. I love his deep dives into the CIA and all those weird connections. Sorry, I had just finished talking about Dark Journalist. He would certainly be on my list of people that I still trust and think are well worth listening to. Jeremy Rise misses some mysterious stuff, I'm sad to say. Well, maybe he's just, Pix doesn't like me being dismissive of certain things or stories. Maybe that's it with your problem with him is similar to your problem with me there, Pix. That girl Jessica says, again, it must be the young kids. Yes. While my kids were doing school at home and we were all locked down and quarantined, I didn't get sick once in 2 years. As soon as my kids went back to school, I started getting sick again. And I mean, colds, stomach virus, flu. And now I seem to have something that feels like a cold, but a little worse. I have a headache. I did have a temperature. I woke up and having cold sweats. I mean, I was soaked with sweats in the middle of the night. And I was having chills last night. So I'm a little concerned, and so is my wife, that it might be the dreaded COVID. So I'm going to take another COVID test. I can't tell you how many I've taken now. I'm going to take another COVID test tomorrow. And if it is positive, my wife and I have a plan for me to just stay in my office as much as possible and try to stay away from the rest of the family. Though my oldest son tested positive for COVID, so he's already had COVID, but he was asymptomatic. He had no symptoms whatsoever. Couldn't even tell he was sick at all. And when he's sick, we know it because he sits down and he's like calmer than usual and he's sort of lethargic. We always know when he's sick. He had COVID. He was exposed to COVID at school, so they recommended a COVID test for all the children that were exposed. We had him tested. It was definitely a positive, and we had that, the not a home test, like the good test. I don't know, what is it called, the PCR test. So he's already been COVID positive and recovered fully. Didn't have any symptoms at all. But we don't know that my wife and my younger son has ever had COVID. So if it turns out that I am COVID positive, I'm going to be staying in my office, quarantining myself and my family as much as humanly possible. I still have to go get my kids off the bus, but other than that, I'm going to try to keep my distance because we certainly don't want to get my wife or my younger son sick from just, being around me. Lee Guy says, Truthseekers, drink whiskey for the cold. I don't know about that. Actually, I started feeling ill after I thought I was just hungover at first, Lee Guy. Because I sort of tied one on a little too much with some cheap beer, and that's never a good idea. And the next day I woke up and I was like, oh, I don't feel so good. And later in the day I was like, oh, my throat's so scratchy. But I thought I was just dehydrated from drinking too much. Anyway, here we are. Got a headache. I could tell that I'm feverish right now. I have a temperature. I got a slight headache. It's not so bad though. And if it is current health crisis or pandemic related, I hope it's the Omicron, because I hear that's the easiest to deal with and the least dangerous. And I hate to say this, I almost hope it is, because I got I'm already vaccinated. If I do happen to be positive, then I will have after the end of this, I would have the vaccine immunity, and I will have natural immunity. And most experts agree that you really can't get COVID twice. Some people think that you can. I don't know. But you know what? I shouldn't even talk about this stuff on this channel. We're going to be starting something called Truthseekers Uncensored, where I'll be able to untie my tongue and say whatever I want. We're looking forward to that. Al Warrior says he's vaxxed and feels like the Terminator. Good. I'm glad that it worked out for you, right? That girl Jessica says make the most of it. Yeah. Grant Haygood, I'm going to take your advice. And pardon the nose blow there, audio people. Kick-ass immune tincture, vitamin C, echinacea pills for a cold. I don't have any echinacea pills, but I've been meaning to get that. And you know what has worked for me in the past, Grant Haywood, but I have to stress, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just telling you my personal experience. Go see your doctor. Whatever ails you, don't listen to me. Go see your doctor. You should get advice from a qualified medical professional. But what I have used in the past that seemed to be somewhat effective, or at least made me feel better, is elderberry syrup. I don't know what it is. They say it's good for you. It can't hurt. So I've been drinking tea with honey and lemon. That makes me feel a little better. But the elderberry syrup, I think that works better, especially for throat stuff. It does something like coats your throat somehow. I don't know. Kate Snyder says, get off YouTube to say what you really feel, Stephen. I don't know how your boyfriend gets away with some of the stuff he says. I'm impressed. Right? Shot is great. I mean, being in your office, make the most of it. Yeah, I'll do 3 streams a day. That girl Jessica, I won't have nothing else to do. I'll be here lonely by myself, waiting for my wife to let me out. I think she's going to padlock me in here. No, she won't. Well, I wouldn't put anything past her. She wants to protect the youngest from getting sick, possibly, because you know how young kids are, especially with me. He's like, Daddy, give me a back ride, and he's jumping on me, and he'll lay on me on the couch and stuff. So she's concerned that he might get it, right? Grant says my girlfriend is an herbalist and uses elderberry. Yeah, I'm gonna order elderberry and echinacea. I'm definitely gonna order that as soon as I get off here. Plan B says, would you jump onto Rumble? Well, it's interesting. We have a Rumble channel. We just increased our distribution to Rumble, Daily Motion, Odyssey, and BitChute, in addition to what we already do, which is Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitch. But the problem is that some of these sites have these weird requirements, like BitChute, the files can only be so big. So I got to figure that part out. And Daily Motion, you can only have hour-long uploads. So I got to only upload hour-long shows. We're going to be doing some shows that will be an hour or under, just so we can get some of them on BitChute. Yeah, Rumble is something that we're looking into as far as live streaming, or we may do the uncensored stream on Twitch, but then I hear that Twitch has some issues with censorship. I'm not sure about that. I'd prefer to do BitChute because that's like the wild, wild west. People are saying all kinds of shit on there. Nobody cares what you say. And to be clear, I'm not going to be saying irresponsible things, and I'm going to back up what I'm saying with science and some studies that I've been reading and some other stuff, right? Paul Cargo, I don't know what he means by this or if it's just a joke. I'm not a gynecologist, but I'll take a look. Ooh, okay. 2 grams of vitamin C a day plus vitamin D. Yeah, I got a whole, I don't have it here, but I have this sort of, I don't even know what it is. It's like a little tote. It looks like a fanny pack, but there's no belt attached to it, and it's all filled with supplements. So I've been taking zinc, niacin, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, a multivitamin, some other stuff. I don't know. I just have this whole regimen. But you know what? It's interesting. I stopped doing that. And then I got sick. The whole time, for 2 years, when my kids were in school, I was taking these supplements religiously every day, like 10 of them, and all this stuff. never got sick. My kids went back to school. I got lazy. I stopped the supplements, and I got sick. So and now I got sick for a second time. But I think I feel better today than I did yesterday. We'll see what tomorrow brings. I'm going to try to get some rest. Thank you, Jesse Singer. I will definitely try to get some rest. So you're still on. Hot damn. Yeah, I'm about to bounce on out of here. So we had a really long day, and somehow I streamed for like 4 hours today. And I apologize again for the mess, the screw up with the interview tonight. It was completely my fault. Once again, I'm DMing John on Twitter going, where's he at? Why is he not here? He's supposed to be doing the interview right now. But it turns out that he's emailing me going, where's the link? I thought we were doing an interview right now. And we got our signals crossed. I wasn't checking my emails. He wasn't checking his Twitter. Hey, it all worked out. We got him. And boy, what a fun interview that was, right? I had a great time tonight. I hope you did too. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. I especially want to thank all the kind and generous supporters and benefactors who sent a super chat. We're going to do one last thing here and check in with the PayPal donation. Some people don't like that super chat, and they would prefer to send a PayPal donation. And I want to remind you that we are a viewer-supported show. So if we are broadcasting live and you're in the live chat, you can always send a super chat. But if the broadcast is ended and you are just listening to a replay and you still want to support our show, you can go to the description of the video here. In the video description is instructions to send a PayPal donation. Just remember to add a note, put your chat room user ID, and anything you want us to shout out, and we will. Right? And our last PayPal donation was a kind and generous $10 Great Britain pounds from Moody Mongol, who says, great work, Stephen. Get yourself some extra eggnog this Christmas. Praise the cash. So thank you, Moody Mongol, for your kindness, your generosity, and your support. The other thing that I should remind everybody is it's not always about money how to support us here. There's one other way that you can really help us, and this definitely helps, and that is to like, comment, subscribe, share these videos, send them to your friends, share them on Twitter, share them on your Instagram, share them anywhere that you can, on Facebook. If you have some friends that like these strange conspiracy and esoteric topics, please copy the video link, send it to your friends, send it through DM, PM, email some people, send our channel link address out, and make sure that you take a few moments, if you can, like this video, smash that like button because YouTube loves it. And then YouTube will love our show more and recommend us more, and we'll get a bigger bullhorn. We'll get more viewers, and that is certainly in our show's best interest. Finally, I want to remind everybody, if you're listening in audio podcast land, you're missing half the fun. Go over to YouTube, put Truthseekers, one word, in the search bar. Look for me, the strange guy with the sunglasses. That would be me, Stephen Cambian, your host here on Truthseekers. And once you find our channel, it's very easy. Just put Truthseekers in the YouTube search bar. We pop right up. You see me with the sunglasses, with that avatar. Hit that subscribe button. Smash the notification bell. And then next time we do a live broadcast, you'll be notified. And you can come here and take part in the live chat. You heard tonight, I let my audience ask the guest as many questions as we can fit in. So if you have a particular interest in a guest and you always wondered something and you want to ask a question to the guest, we let you do that here. And there's always a lively and interesting discussion in the live chat. People come here, some people come here just to socialize with cool people who are interested in these cool, strange topics. And I want to let you know, if you're not already here for the live broadcast, you are most welcome here. We welcome you here. And we want to have you here. We want your input. We want your questions. We want your participation and that interactivity. It's a big part of our show here. What can I say? We're trying to build a bigger bullhorn. And certainly there's a lot of people listening in audio podcast land that aren't here for the live broadcast. So come on over to YouTube, put the Truthseekers in the search bar. It's easy to find us. Smash the subscribe button and be a part of our live taping and broadcasts here. Remember, we do the show live and tape it, and then it goes over to the audio podcast distribution network. So please come on over and enjoy the live chat with us. And that girl Jessica reminding everybody kindly, yes, please do use PayPal because it means the show doesn't lose 30%. That's right. PayPal takes just a little bit of it. It doesn't take a whole 30%. And I especially encourage people, especially, look, it's December and some people are broke. I get that. I'm broke. But some people, I don't know what it is about December. It's the holidays. People are feeling generous. So some people are sending very large, generous contributions. If you're going to send a big, large contribution, please do send it through PayPal so that we could keep a little more of it. And we will certainly still thank you. We read every single PayPal and thank every single person that sends money through PayPal. We thank every single person that sends anything through the super chats. And we thank all new Patreon supporters. I didn't mention Patreon. That's another way that you could support us for as little as $1 a month. You could go over to Patreon. You could get some extra content. We're doing some Patreon-only streams. We do a video show journal talking about the show every month and what's coming up next month. It's sort of a backstage pass. There's just some extra content there. But I always say this, if you're broke and a big fan of the show or you're having a tough time, just send me an email, truthseekershow@gmail.com. Say, hey, can I get the PayPal benefits? Don't tell me what, I don't need any specifics of why you're having a tough time. And it's not that I'm not interested. I just feel it's none of my business. My point is that I don't like putting stuff behind a paywall, but it's a necessary thing for us to do that. My point is, if you're a big supporter of the show and you'd like that content, whatever's going on, just email me and I put you on a list and then I send you out the Patreon links manually when I post them. I do that every month for people, and many people, their situation improves and then they give me the $1 or more. And remember, it's $1 or more. Some people are very generous and I'm thankful for every one of you. I'm so blown away that there's people all over the world. Tonight we had people from Norway were throwing money in my hat, right? We've got people from England throwing money in my hat, Canada, Japan. It is crazy. Mexico. And it warms my heart to see so many people throwing a couple of bucks in my hat to keep the show going. Archaic Revival asked, do you Venmo? No, but I'm going to sign up for that in Cash App. I want to make it as easy as possible. Plan B says 30%. Yes, that's what YouTube takes from the super chats. So, for example, if somebody sends $10, I really only get like 7 of it. It is what it is, though. We're thankful for the super chats because it's the most convenient way and people prefer it. I don't know. There's just something easy about hitting that money button, and plus the recognition, because you get the recognition in the live chat. Your comment posts real big with the colors and everybody gets to see that you supported the show, right? That girl Jessica says, we love a gracious host. Well, I try to be as gracious as I can be. And I mean that about the Patreon benefits. And the reason I started doing that is because somebody messaged me and they told me their whole story. And I felt terrible because I know them. I know they were, I'm not going to name them. It's their business. They were in the live chat every show and they were very big supporters. I seen them on social media sharing every show. I seen them commenting on every show, big supporter of the show. And they reached out to me and told me, how much they enjoyed the show. And then they told me this whole sad story about how, COVID and all these things affected their financial life and how much they would really like to support me on Patreon and get those extra benefits. But, X, Y, or Z's go. And I felt terrible. And I just said, here it is, take it. Hope you do better soon. And they did. But they made me aware that there's people out there that are really supporting me, and I don't need $1 that bad. I would much rather just give it to you and have your support and your, sharing the videos or helping us in other ways. There's all kinds of ways that you can support the show. So what can I say, folks? I want to thank you guys, especially for indulging me with 2 parts on what should have been a 1-part show. But I always say this, this is a live show. You get it, warts and all. You got to see me make a mistake earlier, but I'm telling you, I learned from it, and that'll never happen again. I'm checking email and Twitter and Facebook before every show if there's an issue with a guest not being here, because the miscommunication it's inexcusable. And I'm sorry that happened. My fault. Won't happen again. I always learn from my mistakes, or I try to. You always hear me say this. I'm always happy when there's an audience. Thank you very much for coming here and being a part of mine. We had amazing both shows. There were so many people here. I couldn't believe it, right? And I'm glad for that. And I, again, apologize to the people who showed up to the first show. If you want to get some background information and Yeah, it's in the first one. Part 1. Part 2 is the interview, which we are wrapping up right now. I want to thank my amazing guest, John William Warner IV. I hope that will be the first in a series because he's an interesting guy, right? Interesting guy with an amazing family history that I'm fascinated by. And I really enjoy his takes on many things. And I also want to say one of the reasons that I'm glad for this show is because if I didn't have this show, I wouldn't have got to talk to him in person. I would have got to listen to other interviews, right? So this show gives me a passport into it gets me access to some of these incredible people. And I've gotten to, you guys know this, I have gotten to interview some amazing, incredible people because of this show. So I am thankful and humbled by my position here and my ability to do that. And the whole point of the show is not just that I get to do that, but I get to take you along with me for the journey. And tonight and today has been an amazing part of this journey I will never forget. Thank you for being a part of that journey. So until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.